Kitties and kittens, welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. This day we're covering Twice Kings Thrice, and I just want to congratulate everybody for having made it out of January.
Yeah, that's well, I guess it's what about like 2 weeks down? No, a little over a week. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, long way to go. It's already been a long couple weeks. So, not excited about the rest of the 4 years.
And as many crashes.
Oh wow, yeah, that's true.
Oh yeah,
That's
it's
bad.
funny. We haven't had a plane crash, for a couple
It's
dozen
not funny,
years.
Aaron. It's not funny. Okay.
I
Sorry.
mean, funny as in odd.
Yeah.
That we haven't had a plane crash in a couple dozen years, and then suddenly, just what? Who knew? When you take away the air traffic controllers, suddenly you have plane crashes.
Yeah, who would have
Multiplicity
thought?
of them, like immediately thereafter. Almost like that was a stupid thing to do.
But you see, some of them were probably black and women, which means, of course, even if they were 17 times more qualified than everyone else, that they are a DEI hire and therefore invalid because only white men are good at things.
Yeah. So I'm going to American Atheist National Convention in April, and I am driving.
Yeah, it's a good call.
choice.
And if there's one thing for sure, the Bible teaches that Yahweh controls the wind. So if that dude is up there somewhere, this is his fault ultimately. And
and we know he has a thing against iron chariots. So
he might not be
planes,
pleased with
cars. Who knows?
What an asshole.
So,
Perhaps his adherents should consider that he might not be pleased with them.
yeah. In honor of the 11 hostages released today, toast.
11. Nice.
Oh, but you didn't warn me.
This week, sorry, this week.
Oh, yeah.
This week.
Okay.
Today, 3 were released, and in Thursday, 8, including 5 Thai workers. And this is craft beer, Israeli craft beer called Porter Alon, literally oak porter, which has some oak chips mixed in during the brewing process. So not in the beer itself, but still.
That just sounds like you're drinking wood, man.
Sounds
It is.
good, Tomer.
I am drinking wood.
Ever heard
Excellent.
Ever heard of oak cask?
Yeah, absolutely. Adding
People
oak
like that.
to the making of wines and beers and whiskeys
Whiskey
is a proud and noble tradition and delicious. And if you make red wine in the casks that previously held whiskey, good things happen.
I think it's the other way around, no?
Yeah, they actually had
You can do it either way.
They actually had a line
both ways.
of hookah tobacco that they made in those in like whiskey barrels. So like it also has that kind of earthiness to it, which is really interesting. But the thing is, you can't even get that flavor in the U.S. anymore because that company was banned in the U.S. for some absolute bullshit reason. Because capitalism. Let's say because capitalism. It has nothing to do with anything they were actually doing. It was capitalism.
It's never about health and safety.
No. No. The thing is, health and safety wise, they're the same as every other hookah company. But it was some bullshit lawsuit that this small company couldn't handle. Like even though it was basically like a slap suit in a way. So yeah, they had to stop doing stuff in.
It's almost like Americans
US.
don't really believe in the free market. They only
they don't.
want the market to favor them.
Yeah,
And if it doesn't, they'll cheat.
Yeah. So I'm very excited for today's reading. In chapter 4, we get a whole bunch of miracles that are probably going to remind you of somebody that we'll see a little bit later on in the Bible, maybe in the second half.
Is it Malachi?
You know what? Might be Malachi. Don't put all your money on it though.
Yeah.
So very excited to get to these readings. This is
Yeah.
where things
Which
get a
I
bit more
think,
interesting.
which seemingly I think Lawrence should do the reading because it seems very intrigued.
All right, I will do the reading for chapter 4. Thank you, Tomer.
Yes.
There's one of those that is very intriguing to me reading this now. It's like, what's going on there with the Elisha laying right on top of this sick kid, mouth to mouth, eye to eye? What's going
that
on
was
there?
a-
It
I'm anxious.
prefigures.
Well,
it
maybe we should
prefigures the priesthood.
maybe we should start reading it before we speculate on stuff.
Okay.
So
All right,
This-
I can read through though. Oh, Kat, hello. Are you here to knock out every single Ethernet cable that I own? Okay. All right. Let's get to this reading. In the 18th year of King Jehoshaphat of Judah, Jehoram, son of Ahab, became king over Israel in Samaria. He reigned 12 years. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, though not like his father and mother, for he removed the pillar of Baal that his father had made. Nevertheless, he clung to the sin of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, that he caused Israel to commit. He did not depart from it. Now, King Mesha of Moab was a sheep breeder who used to deliver to the king of Israel 100,000 lambs. And
Good
the
Lord.
wool of 100,000 and the wool, lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams. But when Ahab died, the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. So Jehoram marched out of Samaria at that time and mustered all Israel. As he went, he sent word to King Jehoshaphat of Judah, the king of Moab has rebelled against me. Will you go with me to battle against Moab? He answered, I will. I am as you are. My people are your people. My horses are your horses. Then he asked, by which way shall we march? Jehoram answered, by the way of the wilderness of Edom. So the king of Israel, the king of Judah, and the king of Edom set out. And when they had made a roundabout march of 7 days, there was no water for the army or for the animals that were there. Then the king of Israel said, Alas, the Lord has summoned these 3 kings to hand them over to Moab. But Jehoshaphat said, Is there no prophet of the Lord here, through whom we may inquire of the Lord? Then one of the servants of the king of Israel answered, Elisha, son of Shaphat, who used to pour water on the hands of Elijah, is here. Jehoshaphat said, The word of the Lord is with him. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went down to him. Hold on, this cat is like ripping shit apart. Get over
Is there no one here who pretends to speak to a magic imaginary friend? So that
Well,
we can
it's always-
find out what his imaginary friend says.
Well,
Yeah,
it's always more convincing if they have heritage. They learned the art and science of speaking to imaginary friends from a very famous hairy man who killed a bunch of other men who spoke to a different imaginary man. And this is what gives him legitimacy, you see.
And he was nowhere, and they were nowhere near as hairy. Anyways, for verse 13 here, Elisha said to the king of Israel, What have I to do with you? Go to your father's prophets or to your mother's. But the king of Israel said to him, No, it is the Lord who has summoned these 3 kings to hand them over to Moab. Elisha said, As the Lord of hosts lives, whom I serve, were it not that I have... What the fuck was that? I swear, these fucking cats are insane. They're out of their goddamn mind. Okay.
It's your problem.
Yeah, you're right. It is.
Welcome to cats.
Whom I serve, were it not that I have regard for King Jehoshaphat of Judah, I would give you neither a look nor a glance. but get me a musician. And then, while the musician was playing, the hand of the Lord came on him. And he said, Thus says the Lord, I will make this wadi full of pools. For thus says the Lord, you shall see neither wind nor rain, but the wadi shall be filled with water, so that you shall drink, you, your army, and your animals. This is only a trifle in the sight of the Lord. For he will also hand Moab over to you. You shall conquer every fortified city and every choice city, every good tree you shall fell. All springs of water you shall stop up. And every good piece of land you shall ruin with stones. That just sounds like a dick move. The next day, about the time of the morning offering, suddenly water began to flow from the direction of Edom until the country was filled with water. When all the Moabites heard that the kings had come up to fight against them, all who were able to put on armor, from the youngest to the oldest, were called out and were drawn up at the frontier. When they rose early in the morning and the sun shone upon the water, the Moabites saw the water opposite them as red as blood. They said, This is blood. The kings must have fought together and killed one another. That's the dumbest fucking conclusion. Okay, anyways. Now then, Moab, to the spoil. But when they came to the camp of Israel, the Israelites rose up and attacked the Moabites, who fled before them as they entered Moab. As they entered Moab, they continued to attack. The cities they overturned, and on every good piece of land, everyone threw a stone until it was covered. Every spring of water they stopped up, and every good tree they felled. Only at Kirhareseth did the stone walls remain until the slingers surrounded and attacked it. When the king of Moab saw that the battle was going against him, he took with him 700 swordsmen to break through opposite the king of Edom, but they could not. Then he took his firstborn son, who was who was to succeed him, and offered him as a burnt offering on the wall. Choices, and great wrath came upon Israel. So they withdrew from him and returned to their own land. So, this is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff to talk about here.
Yes, it is.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that human sacrifice of his adult son, old enough to be groomed to succeed him.
Well, I mean, that could have been anyone. He's just the one that was to succeed him, so that just means
Yeah, no, I'm sure he
Firstborn.
before, but he still burnt his child alive on the wall. And to be clear, it worked.
Yeah, it fucking worked, which means which means like the thing is, like, in this section already we had a it wasn't exactly like an admission of like other gods, but it was kind of there-ish, because when
Well,
Elisha said to the king,
I
"What
mean-
have I?" When he said, "Go to your father's prophets or to your mother's," and then he's like, the king of Israel said, "No, it's the Lord who has summoned these three kings." So he's
Exactly.
specifically looking at from one god, not from the others.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, all right, I'll ask my God."
And we have again Yahweh recognized as a specific, distinct God, recognized in a pantheon.
Or among
Um,
like some other gods.
Yeah, I
Although-
mean,
I was gonna say that it seems that if he says that he seems to contradict himself. The author does. I think in chapter 5, where it does seem to kind of say something like, "Oh, and Yahweh is the only true God of the world," or something to
Yeah,
that
the
effect.
next chapter.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, because that it is composed by different writers, right?
Yeah, because this
So,
one, I mean, look at the parallels between this and like the Joshua stuff, and even and obviously some
Yeah.
Egypt stuff as well. So like there's so much stuff. Like even the direction that they were heading. I'm not sure if it's the same in the Hebrew or not, but I know it's very similar in English. What was it? I did notice, yeah, by the way of the wilderness of Edom. But I think in the earlier Deuteronomistic history books, it was like by the way of the wilderness of something else. But I forget the exact phrase.
What verse are we talking about?
Oh, verse 8.
Mm.
Like I remember when they were like
Um,
routing stuff in
Oh
Joshua.
yeah, through the Hebrew is Derech Midbar Edom, the way of the desert or wilderness of Edom.
Okay, and I think that there were passages very early on in the Deuteronomistic history, so like probably Joshua or Judges or something like that, that also had like it wasn't of Adam, it was somewhere else, I think. But it was like very anachronistic, which is why we know it wasn't like super early. But I forget exactly
So-
what the verse was. I think I actually might have the commentary on it somewhere in my.
I was going to ask, what do they have to say about the authorship of this? Because obviously Deuteronomistic history with priestly gloss, if you want to call it that,
I mean,
sometimes is what you're dealing with overall. But like, do we have anything specific about this area?
most of it is composed by the what McKenzie calls the prophetic narrator. He takes verses 1 through 3 to be DH, and then the rest 7 through through 25, at least most of it is from the prophetic narrator, and then the original battle account is 4 through 7, and the second part of 25 and 26 through 27.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, I can see that division inserting the additional sort of drama of the
So
prophet
God
and the
never,
argument.
God doesn't have any good stories. I mean, like the Bible doesn't have one time where God inspired all these people to come together to achieve something great. There's nothing about new technology. There's nothing about producing great harvests. There's nothing about building wonderful things or coming together to help people. When one group of whichever tribe you want to say, they found that there's another group that's suffering greatly, so they go out and help them. There's none of these kind of stories. But what you do have is everybody killing everybody and everybody killing everybody some more, until one guy says, "Hey, I'm losing this battle. Let me set one of my children on fire so that I can win."
Yeah, I mean,
And
that's
it
ancient
worked.
history for you.
Well, and it worked is the sick thing. Like, I get that wars were a thing and are a thing, and sometimes you do have to fight them, as much as I wish that wasn't true. But
Yeah.
like, this is just war crimes. You know that salting the earth after you conquer an area is a war crime. To destroy the productivity of a land is a war crime. To fell every good tree and they're just destroying it wantonly. It's not even just normal conquest. Well, these are our fields now, and we'll grow our barley.
How then is God not? I know this is stereotypical that atheists always just say that God is evil, but how is he not?
He wrote the book. We're just noticing.
He literally wrote the book on how to be evil.
It's like, hey, would you like to do a little
Okay, so
genocide? No, I would not.
So I did just check where I was getting that connection to the earlier narrative.
Yeah.
So like there is for example in Exodus, it looks like, which does explain more of the connection here. In Exodus, it's like by way of the land of the Philistines. And let's see, there was a different one too.
I mean, there's also near the end of the chapter, it says that he tried to make a what's it called, with like his 200 men to get through the line opposite the king of Edom. I think there's a version that says Aram instead.
Which verse?
That would be the last, second penultimate, 26.
King of Aram.
Yeah.
That's the old Latin. Yeah. Mackenzie
Old
writes that. Yeah. Mackenzie writes that Aram would be a more likely source of aid for the king of Moab than Edom, especially if there is no king there yet.
Yeah, but Edom is one of the kings attacking him, right? There's two
Mhm.
Israelite kings and the Edomite king, right? So you
Um,
could have seen that as a weak point to get through.
I guess.
But he's saying that it makes sense for it to have been Aram because that's like him trying to run away. You're saying,
Or
Yeah.
run to an ally.
but it's yeah.
Also, to me, the miracle with the water that doesn't seem all that impressive. Like they're in a
It's
river
just, it's a
valley.
flash flood.
Yeah, like that's if you dig in there, you're gonna find some water. Like what's miraculous?
But also that area is known for flash floods, and they can be very dangerous. Like here is a place; it's completely dry. It's there's no rain. It's a hot day, and then suddenly there's a
Next thing
wall
you
of
know.
water coming down the valley.
Next
Like
thing you know, the whole
yeah.
world is engulfed with water. You have
Like-
proven the flood, Isaac.
well, I mean, I don't think a flash flood in the Negev is something that would have inspired a global flood. It makes sense that that's based on an pre-existing story, from somewhere like Mesopotamia. Anyway, so this is one side of the story of how Mesha, the king of Moab, is rebelling against the son of Ahab, who is a descendant of Omri. But we do have the Mesha Stele, or Stela,
Mhm.
whatever, and it reads a bit different. It seems that Mesha had a different take on how it all went down. So, if you want, I can maybe read a little bit from his perspective.
Yeah,
I
go
would
ahead.
love to
Read it
hear
in
that.
the original language.
Anak Mesha bin Chemosh Milik mi Dibon. No. Okay. I am Mesha, son of
Melakhim.
Chemosh Gad, king of Moab, the Dibonite. My father reigned over Moab 30 years, and I have reigned after my father. And I have built this sanctuary for Chemosh in Karcha, a sanctuary of salvation, for he saved me from all aggressors, and he made me look upon all mine enemies with contempt. Omri was king of Israel and oppressed Moab during many days, and Chemosh, for Chemosh was angry with his aggressions. His son succeeded him, and he also said, I will oppress Moab. In my days, he said, let us go, and I will see my desire upon him and his house. And Israel said, I shall destroy it forever. Now Omri took the land of Madeba and occupied it in his day, and in the days of his son, 40 years. And Chemosh had mercy on it in my time. And I built Baal Meon and made therein the ditch, and I built Kiratayim. And the men of Gad dwelled in the country of Ataroth from ancient times, and the king of Israel fortified Ataroth. I assaulted the wall and captured it, and killed all the warriors of the city for the well-pleasing of Chemosh and Moab. I removed from it all the spoil, and offered it before Chemosh in Kiriath. And I placed therein the men of Siran and the men of Mochrath. And Chemosh said to me, go take Nevo against Israel. And I went in the night, and I fought against it from the break of day till noon, and I took it. And I killed in all 7,000 men, women and maidens, for I devoted them to Ashtar Chemosh. And I took from it the vessels of Jehovah, and offered them before Chemosh. And the kings of Israel fortified Yahaz and occupied it, when he made war against me, and Chemosh drove him out before me. And I took from Moab 200 men in all, and placed them in Yahaz, and took it to annex it to Dibon. I built Karcha, the wall of the forest, and the wall of the hill. I have built its gates, and I built its towers. I have built the palace of the king, and I made the prisons for the criminals within the wall. And there were no wells in the interior of the wall in Karcha. And I said to all the people, make you every man a well in his house. And I dug the ditch for Karcha with the chosen men of Israel. I built Aroer, and I made the road across the Arnon. I built Beth Bamoth, for it was destroyed. I built Bezer, for it was cut down by the armed men of Dabon, for all Dabon was now loyal. And I reigned from Bikran, which I added to my land. and I built Beth Gamul and Beth Diblatayim, Beth Baal Ma'on, and I placed there the poor people of the land. And as to the Horonaim, the men of Edom dwelt therein on the descent from old. And Chemosh said to me, go down, make war against Horonaim, and take it. And I assaulted it, and I took it. And then it kind of trails off. So
I can actually understand most of it
the
in the original reading,
Moabite
because it's the
and
Moabite and
Hebrew
Hebrew
is-
are very similar. Yeah.
Yeah, mutually intelligible, pretty much.
Yeah.
If you can read like
So
the
is it-
Phoenician script, you can.
Is
probably
it like
understand
the
it.
relationship between Russian and Ukrainian, where they just kind of get the gist of what the other one is saying, or is it closer than that?
I mean, I guess. I mean, there are some.
They're both
words.
Canaanite languages. They're closer
Yeah.
than Hebrew and Aramaic.
Yeah.
So it would have been very close.
Oh, they're closer than Hebrew and Aramaic. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
it's
a
like
good measurement.
Hebrew, Moabite, Edomite.
I mean, I know that they're all, you
Um,
know,
They're
the same
they're
language
very
group, but-
similar.
Yeah, and it's all.
And
It's, the,
also Phoenician, right?
I mean, the
they-
Stela is
yeah.
written in old Hebrew script, right? Proto Hebrew script.
Oh, Proto Hebrew.
You could call it that. You could call it
it- or is
Canaanite.
it-
You can call it Phoenician. Yeah.
It Paleo Hebrew. I
proto.
mean, it's not.
Paleo.
Yeah, it's
it
the
is
same
proto.
as Paleo. It's the same
It's
as
called
Paleo
Proto
Hebrew.
Hebrew as well. It's
It's
Paleo
the it's
Hebrew.
the same as Paleo. Yeah, Paleo.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Old
Oh
Paleo.
yeah, because
And
Proto-Sinaitic
languages
is the
branch
other one.
off and have,
Yeah.
they can be proto more than one thing.
Yeah, they're very similar, but for example, like the first thing you see straight away is the first person pronoun in Hebrew is ani or anochi, and in Moabite it seems to be a anak or anaki.
Anoch. I mean,
Yeah.
it
So,
could
yeah.
be read Anochi as well.
Yeah, it's the same
and
letter.
yeah, it could be if you have the chaf safit with a cherek. Anochi.
Yeah. This doesn't have the e at the end. Yeah, it doesn't have an extra
but
letter.
but it could be
read.
read
It could be
chi as
vocalized.
well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he keeps mentioning Chemosh. He says he's a son of Chemosh, but it also seems to be like. the
I mean,
name of-
that's
That's a very
basically
Or
common
his
the,
father's name is Chemosh Gad, maybe, which is
yeah. It is like the
Yeah.
national Moabite god.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean the most accepted, I think, interpretation for the wrath of the last verse is that this is Chemosh's wrath, though others suggest that this is Yahweh's wrath, like Hens-Piazza and McKenzie,
Yeah,
or there are other opinions as well. Though I'll get to that when
yeah.
I
The
get to
the
commentary.
version, the translation that I read from is by Shmuel Achitov, and
Yeah, Chituv, which I used
yes,
as
I mean-
commentaries.
yeah. So he says like, Omri was king and oppressed Moab, and Chemosh was angry with his aggressions. But like in some of the older translations, you have like Omri oppressed Moab for many days because Chemosh was angry with his land. Like it sounds very like, like almost Israelite, biblical, like, our God was angry with us, so we were punished by being
That's- yeah.
oppressed by an outside force.
They love doing that, but yeah, it would definitely make it weird that it was preceded immediately with sacrifice.
Yeah, it's notable that in the Stele, is there any mention of the sacrifice of his son?
No.
No, I
Okay,
don't
so-
think there's.
I wonder if that wasn't an excuse / maybe a bit of slander. Like, why did you walk away if you were all victorious as you claim you were in every area of this? And it's like,
Yeah, I mean-
well, and then
He-
also engaging in human sacrifice is definitely something that can justify your hatred of a group
Yeah.
of people.
So it
I-
seems to be that the agreement between the two perspectives is that the Moabites kind of succeeded in rebelling. The
Mhm.
Moabite, or the Moabite version is like, I killed all of them and Chemosh drove them out and blah blah, and I built this and I built that, and then the Israelites like, yeah, we dealt with the rebellion so well, but then like God was mad at us for not being as passionate compared to like, oh, you see, look, he sacrificed his son, I don't think you're that into doing what I want, therefore I'm gonna make you scared and go home or something like
Oh
that.
my fucking god! What is this?
Oh my
I want to
God.
address a conversation
I
going
have
on in the
bugs all
comments
over.
where somebody says that we came from rock, or we are all living rock.
What?
Oh my God, Arn, why do you do this?
Why do I do
But-
this? Because it so irritates me. We're
I
not
know. That's
rock.
why I'm asking.
You-
Why
I-
do you do it?
You
I
get
think
annoyed easily.
no, I don't think he's saying we're literally rock. I think he's saying like we are stardust. Is
That
you know,
stardust would be one thing, but rock by definition is a solid.
and we
and
are, but we
light-
are
yeah, but
solid.
eroded.
Yeah, we're
If-
solid. Confirmed. We are rocks. All right.
Yeah.
Look,
I think
there's
I think there are
calcium in our bones,
hypotheses.
there's iron in our blood, and it's very possible
Yeah.
that that one kind of clay, I can never remember how to pronounce the type of it, was the lattice work on which proto-DNA was formed, because yeah. So that's at least one of the
Yeah, I mean, we're
Probable
While
hypothesis
advanced
are
life
not
forms
rocks,
do
but
include
rocks are made of
minerals that are
minerals.
referred
Yeah.
to as rocks in solid form,
Hmm.
the earliest
salt.
organisms and the most basic life designs don't have that kind of mineral. Like water, for example, in a solid state is not considered rock. Most of our constituent components in the most primitive developmental stages are not considered rock. We're not mineral. We're not from rock. That's just none of that is true.
Yeah.
We do have iron
Rock
in our
is not
blood,
a clay.
but again, iron is a metal, and metal also is typically not referred to as rock in solid form.
And the way that it exists in the hemoglobin is in its elemental form,
I should have put a
not
timer.
its metal like solid. It's an atom of
Right.
iron
There's no
that's
minerals.
embedded inside. That's it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Homer has turned back into a mathematical equation. I think he's mad at us.
Okay.
It's just, Kent Hovind loves to, his favorite lie is to tell people that say that people who accept evolution, that we think that we came from a rock. And he bases this on the idea that the earth is a rock, but the earth is not a rock. It is a ball of molten rock, and the word molten rock is a contradiction of itself because molten means it's liquid, which means it's not rock. And that's already confusing. But it's also described as a ball of molten rock and metal. So metal being distinguished from rock. And I've gotten Hovind to admit publicly that water in a solid form is not rock. So not everything that is in solid form is rock. There's only certain things that are considered rock, certain things that are classified as minerals. I looked up what geologists consider to be in any of the components that would be considered rock in solid form. They don't include any of the constituent components of the earliest life forms. We did not come from a rock. We didn't come from rock at all. The earth is not just rock, it's rock and metal. And then there are a bunch of other like amino acids and a number of organic chemicals that are not considered rock even in solid form. We did not come from rocks. We did not come from a rock. It's just one old man lying the only way he knows how to lie.
When he's talking?
All right. Should we get to...
I have commentary as well, so
I mean, are there any more comments to read? No. Oh, there weren't any. I thought I saw
okay.
someone tag go for it, but whatever.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's not
so
it's
I'll
not really
start-
on
sorry.
topic, so I didn't but
Oh,
I can.
Oh,
But
shocker.
Okay.
finally.
Go ahead,
then,
Tomer.
then you can decide.
Okay. Okay, I'll start on verse 2. The sacred stone of Baal the sacred stone of Baal that his father had made. Septuagint read sacred stones. This sacred stone, in Hebrew matzevah, was not previously mentioned. Neither is it mentioned among the cult objects of Achab, as we see in 1 Kings 16, 32, and 33. Cogan writes that regardless, there is no reason to doubt the validity of the establishment of a pillar by Achab as part of the Canaanite worship. He notes that kings setting pillars to their gods is well attested in the ancient Near East. He writes that while the exact reasoning behind Jehoram's decree is unclear, the author of Kings toned down its criticism of Jehoram because of it. Since this pillar seemed to have been restored or replaced before Jehu's reform in 1026 and 27, McKenzie writes that Joram's single reform act, quote, was not very far-reaching. He may have removed the pillar, but kept it intact so that it was restored at some point, end quote. He suggests that Matzeva could be a corruption of Mizbeach, altar, referring to the altar erected by Achab in 1 Kings 16:32, according to Hobbes, or that a minor reform, quote-unquote, of Joram's came to be credited to Jehu, according to A. Lemire. On verse 4, Mesha, king of Moab. Fritz writes, quote, by one of the rare fortunes in the study of biblical history, we have epigraphic evidence for the name of Israel's opponent, Mesha of Moab, from a non-biblical source, end quote. This source, the Mesha Stele, was discovered intact in 1868 at the site of Dibon, north of Wadi Arnon. Sweeney writes that it was subsequently blown up by the Arabs, who were interested in selling the pieces for larger sums of money. He also writes that Mesha's
yeah, but we do have some way of reconstructing
we
the
do.
parts that are missing. So.
Yeah, we do. He also writes that Mesha's victory over Israel likely occurred after the Arameans had defeated Israel and killed Achab at Ramoth Gilead.
Yep.
Hens-Piazza writes that while it is very probable that the current text grows out of some historical data on Mesha's revolt, the degree and length of the rebellion remains a matter of debate. Since Mesha is called the king of Moab through the remainder of the story, some, like McKenzie, suggested that the name is secondary, or that it was a way of disparaging him, since only Jehoshaphat is regularly called by the name Jehoshaphat. On that same verse, raised sheep. In Hebrew, noked. Also, the Septuagint has noked as well, because the Septuagint was the original. Very sophisticated language, Greek, right?
Wait, so
million
the
words.
Septuagint thought that it was like a title, or
No, I don't know what they thought.
they just transliterated the word. They're like,
Yeah.
I don't know how to translate this.
Yeah.
Wait,
At
which
least they left some record of it.
In verse 4.
verse 4? Okay.
So the word appears in Amos 1:1, describing Amos as a sheep breeder, in Hebrew, banokedim, and he himself testified that Yahweh took him away from following the flock in Amos 7:15. Likewise, the Septuagint reads, Vulgate reads, nourished many sheep, Targum was owning flocks, nourished, and Peshita, a herdsman. Sweeney writes that noked is a title for an official who prepares sheep for trade, export, or delivery as tribute to an overlord, as seen in the Akkadian nakidu and Ugaritic nakad. He writes that Moab is well suited for raising sheep, and the wool would constitute tribute to Israel, as we see in Isaiah 16:1. Still on that verse, he had to pay a tribute of 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams. While the numbers given are preserved in early translations, several commentators take them to be an exaggeration. For example, Cogan writes that the intention of the excessive numbers is to remark Moab's total enslavement to Israel. Inscriptions by Assyrian kings also used high numbers, such as Sennacherib, who describes spoils taken from Babylon, which included more than 800,000 sheep. And Josephus in Antiquities 9:29 gives a figure of 200,000 sheep along with their wool.
What strikes me in comparing it to the way that the Stele speaks is that a lot of this is very, very typical of the time. My God told me to go to war. I did this in my service of my God. It's almost, it's like, it's almost courtesies and unthinking courtly language to be like, yeah, of course we offered to the God and the God said to go defend our people. It's almost offhanded.
Don't you guys think that this unity with Israel and Judah and Edom Doesn't that sound too good to be true, or is there like other evidence that backs up this coalition?
Yeah, they weren't exactly best of friends in the Bible.
No.
But
They went on
I
and
did
off,
I did look
though.
it up. Yeah, they just had Noked in there.
That's a good
It just said
Fine.
the king of Moab was a Noked, and it's like that doesn't mean anything.
Well, maybe Ammon Hillman can find some reason.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think with the king of Edom, he would have been like subject to either Judah or Israel. I'm not sure exactly. It would make more sense for him to be subject to Judah because they're in the south. But I think in the story it says that actually he's subject to Israel.
Trevor Wright says, how many messiahs are possible within the Jewish messianic interpretation of the Tanakh? How many? Let me see. I'll read that again. I'm reading it wrong. How many messiahs are possible within the Jewish messianic interpretation of the Tanakh? Are there among the Jewish sects?
I mean, there is only one. Right?
There's
It's
one
a
Messiah,
single Messiah.
as
There
in the
can be
Savior
only
and
one.
bringing
Yeah.
the age, and the idea of like the Messiah dying and coming back again is not really a Jewish idea.
Well, I mean, there are a bunch
there
of
is-
messiahs, but
There are
like,
other people
when
with
it
the
comes to like,
title.
The
Yeah.
Almost like an
Messiah is
end-time
just
Messiah.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
didn't Cyrus, king of Persia, wasn't he the
yeah,
Messiah?
he was called a messiah. Yeah.
Right.
It-
The Hebrew word Mashiach just means anointed one, so it could refer to any king of Israel, David, Solomon, right? And then it could also refer to non-Israelite kings, like
Pontius Pilate
Cyrus.
in Jesus
Cyrus.
Christ Superstar said, "You Jews produce messiahs by the sackful."
Wasn't
hasn't
wrong
there
at
been-
that time in history.
But
Hasn't there been
is
over
also-
over the last 2,000 years various Jewish
Yeah.
sects that have had messiahs
that
leading
means-
them?
Yeah. There were a
claimants.
handful of false
the most
messiahs like
famous ones
Shabtai
would be,
Tzvi,
like,
Jacob
like-
Funkel, Shuka Kuchayil, etc., etc. Like
Yeah.
it's a
Shabtai
very
Some
Tzvi
of
is
them
probably the
still
most
have
famous.
believers. I mean, there's
Yeah.
that sect. Menachem Schneerson, is it?
Yeah, so that's like the group
Isaac
that I
can tell
grew
you.
up in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Chabad are a bit more complicated because they believe that he could be the Messiah or he should be the Messiah, but he hasn't revealed himself yet. And then when he died, it became even more complicated. Some people were like, "That's it. There's no way he could still be the Messiah," and others are like, "No, like, it's
Occultation.
possible that it's possible that the Messiah could be a with the end of days, God will bring back people from the dead, and one of them will be the Messiah."
See,
it's
at that point,
possible,
just
but
believe in
it's-
Jesus.
It's very
Yeah,
it's
it's
well
the
Jesus
same
is different
story.
because Jesus like he came as the Messiah, failed, was killed, and then he's like, no, he'll come back a second time. So I think this one's more like he hasn't actually
Wait,
claimed
Jesus
himself.
failed
It's-
as the Messiah?
Well,
Though
from a
I
Jewish
do think
perspective,
it
yes.
it will be interesting to look at all the different Jewish Messiah claimants throughout
Yeah,
history.
yeah,
I think
there-
I think
there's
it'll be an
definitely a
interesting
big-
project.
Yeah, I hope, Tomer, when we get into the New Testament, I hope that we manage to retain you because there has been some worry about that. I would
Don't
like
wor-
to
don't
see-
worry.
I would
Yeah.
like to see a comparison between the Jewish prophecies of the Messiah prophecies and how Jesus, to my understanding, failed all of them. I mean, with the singular exception that Jesus was Jewish.
I
He
mean,
was
to be
failed every
fair,
I'm sorry.
I think it's off topic, but to be fair, I mean the New Testament sometimes adapts to the Old Testament just to show so that Jesus will be the Messiah.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it
So,
ranks
Oh,
him as
yeah.
the Messiah a whole bunch. Yeah.
So is that a
Yeah.
retcon? I don't know though.
It's
yeah,
a
I'll just say
retcon.
like
Okay.
within like Orthodox Judaism, it's a big like disagreement about whether like Chabad are going too far beyond what is mainstream Judaism with their idea about Menachem Mendel Schneerson being the Rebbe. The main argument I would say for him being recognized by Jews as like a possible candidate Messiah is that during his life he was pretty much seen as the leader of religious Judaism in a sense. Like he was very influential. He was influential in American
Did
politics
Jews?
as well.
Let me make sure I understand what
Yeah.
you're saying.
Yeah.
Did Jews ever consider Jesus to be a leader or the leader of Judaism?
I mean,
No.
some
I mean,
Jews did, like the
yeah,
Christian
some-
Jews.
they
The
were
ones that
later
became
called
Christian,
Christians.
maybe.
Some
Yeah.
he followers in his day.
Yeah.
I mean, the
But, like-
Gospels paint the picture that the religious authorities rejected his message.
They did.
So
Yeah.
perhaps there was a following, but I don't think that it came directly from like the fundamentalists or the
But
leaders.
the idea
God.
that there were dozens and dozens of messianic claimants or pseudo-messianic claimants or prophetic claimants at the time, it's something that's well attested. I mean, yeah, you've got Josephus giving a list of
Theodas.
GZI, whatever the plural of Jesus is.
That's my
Uh,
preference. Jesus.
And there's a different account of it even in the Gospels, which is the one I use when Christians are pretending that Jesus is so special and significant. Not in the Gospels, sorry, in Acts, where they write Gamaliel. I forget how to pronounce
Gamaliel?
it.
Gamaliel or whatever.
Gamaliel, yeah, he was
Gamaliel. Yeah.
very
The
well
Hebrew is
respected rabbi
Gamaliel.
at the time. And they
Gamliel.
write
Oh,
him
okay.
in
Gamliel.
as arguing on behalf of Paul, so they end up sending him to Rome for dramatic emphasis. And he literally sets out that, oh, look at all these different messianic claimants who died and their followers were scattered because of and most of them are named Judas in his version for whatever reason. But yeah, they're just, it was a thing. It was absolutely a thing that there were all kinds of wannabe prophet, possibly messiahs, either claiming to be a messiah or their followers being all hyped up and wanting to, wanting the good part to come now, thought they were messiahs, whether they ever explicitly said those words or not. So
Yeah, exactly.
Some
like the whole
wondering
thing with
where was
Schneerson,
their
like it
father's
wasn't something
hammer.
that he proclaimed or anything. Sorry.
Trevor and Wright says, to what extent is the biblical narrative aware of the timeline of kings mentioned? Do they think of time in the same manner other cultures at the time of its own? There's
I don't understand
punctuation
what
would
you-
help me read this. Let me try
Yeah.
it again. To what extent is the biblical narrative aware of the timeline of kings mentioned? I'm going to assume there's a period there and then a capital D. Do they think of time in the same manner other cultures at the time or its own cultural development?
I think they're trying to say, do they have an idea of, like, in their head of when these kings lived in respect to other cultures, maybe? And
Could be.
I don't know about that.
What
Like-
were they going by any calendar? Because I mean,
The
they
date
were running by the
relative.
Hebrew calendar, right?
Yeah, they're
Was
using
that
the
in
Hebrew
effect at
calendar,
this
but
point?
it's
In the
also,
time around.
but they don't. The Hebrew calendar
Oh.
wasn't established until Hillel the second, I think, and before that, right, it would have just been like they had a tradition of this is the year of the king, blah blah blah. I think
mean,
the
Let me help understand.
I thought after the exiles, they had to adapt to the Aramaic, the Assyrian calendar, right? Is that not correct?
during when they were in Babylonia, they adopted the names of the months, and they did. I think, but it was during that time. I think when they around the time they established an actual calendar, because a calendar is like it's a mathematical formula of like when the holidays are, when the months are, and all that stuff. Before that, it would have literally have been like in Jerusalem. There is a the Beth Din, the courts, and two people would come in and be like, "We saw the new moon," and the judges would be like, "Okay, the new month has started." Like that's how they knew when the month started. It wasn't mathematical. It was when the new moon was sighted. And if it had been more than 30 days, then it would just be proclaimed as the new month has started now. And then once they established a mathematical model for the with the leap years, right, they would add a month every like 4.5 years, something. I don't know exactly the mathematics behind it. There's like a 19-year cycle, and within a 19-year cycle, there's like 4.
No, well, my question on
Yeah.
this is, supposedly the year is 5785 right now.
Yes,
that
from creation.
2025 on the Gregorian calendar is 5785 on the Jewish calendar, or at least right
Yeah.
now it is. So when at this time that we're talking about, were people using the Hebrew calendar? then.
No, definitely
No.
not. They weren't using an established calendar, and they also weren't using. I don't think the idea of saying this is the year since creation, I don't think that was established until either probably Second Temple period was probably when they started using it.
It would
'Cause
have to be.
They normally would have used the years of the kings as, this is the year 15 of this king. And you can see in the story that we're reading now, right? This king became king in the 15th year of this other king. They were just using relative years. And then the length of the years, and that's kind of how they would figure out how long it's been, right? They just add up the reigns.
Reminds me of old imperial measurements when the length of a foot would change every time you got a new king. Or maybe that's a myth, but it's a funny story.
So people using relative, counting the year of the king was very common. And also, like, the year would always start on Nisan, which is the first month in the Bible, even though Jewish New Year is in the 7th month. The first month of the year for like the royal calendar would have been Nisan. And so if the king was crowned in Adar, which is the last month, he would start his second year a month later. Yeah.
At that point, I just put it off and have a massive celebration.
Yeah, exactly.
So when did people start using the Jewish calendar? Was it after the Julian calendar?
No. So the Jewish calendar, as it is, like the mathematical system, as far as I understand, was established by Hillel II, which is, I think he's definitely like AD, but like not that far, not that long after. He's mentioned in the Talmud. I think he's the grandson of Hillel the Great.
When you say AD, you mean I'm assuming you mean Common Era CE.
Yeah, CE.
That would be post Julian. That would, right? I mean, not yet Gregorian.
When was the Julian calendar established? Wasn't established
45. Julian calendar was started at 45 BC.
Oh, but they weren't using the Common Era numbering system. They were just
God, no.
No.
Pope Gregory II, I think it was, it created the Gregorian calendar in like 1585 and then backdated it. So prior to 1585,
the Julian calendar is an actual Roman
on the calendar. Julian calendar. Nobody was counting by the Gregorian calendar. It didn't yet exist, but he backdated it. So now everybody thinks that the Gregorian calendar had been going on since.
Yeah, but the Julian calendar, people that use the Julian calendar, I don't know if there's anyone anymore, but they were also using like the
now
same
I can say
year,
off
right?
topic.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm just trying to get a placement in time.
Well, there's the establishment of the calendar, and then there's the year that calendar started, and those two I don't think they ever line up, right?
Because I mean,
you don't create a new calendar
is when the Gregorian calendar began to exist.
Yeah.
In 1585 of the but the Julian calendar was there's not even a way. I can't just add 45 years because it's measured differently. Yeah. So
the Gregorian calendar isn't about establishing a date. I think they were using the this AD system. I don't know what BC was called back then. So I don't know, maybe.
Well, I guess
AD
the Jews
was
wouldn't
Latin.
be using BC, would they?
BC, they wouldn't be using BC because that's English, right? But the AD system would have been established before the Gregorian came in, because the Gregorian is just a reformation of the calendar itself, like when leap years should happen, because they realized that Easter was happening at the wrong time of the year. Right.
Basically,
so they needed leap
it was
years.
standardizing somewhat existent practices.
It was an improvement, right? Because they understood how long a year was a lot better than when they established the Julian year. So they were able to make a much more precise system that wouldn't, every year there's the calendar doesn't match up with the real year exactly. And over time it drifts. And the Gregorian is just that much more accurate. And I think it was like 11 days off when they changed the calendar. Like it went from like one date in the Julian calendar to like 11 days later in the Gregorian.
Oh yeah, there was a jump at
Yeah.
one point where just a bunch of days were deleted out of the calendar.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay,
ACDC.
I don't mean to keep us off topic. I thought I had a simple question. When did the Jews start counting on the Hebrew calendar?
I don't know when they started the numbering, when they started using the year number, but the current Hebrew calendar that still works because it's later than Julian but earlier than Gregorian is from like, I don't know, a few hundred.
Are you sure that it's
CE.
later than Julian but before? And when you say before Gregorian, you mean before 1585?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. It's Talmudic. It's we're talking about a guy
someone
who was
can
around
do
at that time.
a doctoral dissertation on the incomprehensibility of calendars and the difficulty of coordinating a sense of time.
Yeah, the length of a day in relation to the length of a year has no, like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, there's no.
Sorry, I didn't mean to completely
doesn't-
suspend everything. So, Tomer, please continue.
Oh, it's 10 days. Okay.
Okay, so on verses 5 through 9, Fritz comments, First, Jehoram urges the king of neighboring Judah to join forces. Jehoshaphat's words, I am with you, my people are your people, my horses are your horses, echo 1 Kings 22:4. Rather than a voluntary declaration of support, they are the formula in which the weaker partner in an alliance confirms the obligation into which he has entered. The implied power relation lets us assume that Judah was politically dependent on Israel during the Omride period, although this dependency is not thematized here. That the king of Edom is unnamed equally points to an inferior position of Edom. The campaign remains essentially the task of the king of Israel, even if Judah and Edom participate, in the case of Judah probably without much choice. End quote. On verse 7, Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. The Lucianic recension has Achaziah, king of Judah. And the name of the Judean king is not mentioned in verses 11, 12, and 14. Cogan writes that this change fits the alternative chronology of Lucian. Lucian. He also rejects the opinion of some scholars like J.M. Miller and J.D. Schenkel and A.R. Green, who suggested that originally Achaziah's name appeared in the prophetic narrative. Likewise, McKenzie writes that the identification of the Lucianic recension, quote, completely undermines the plot of the story and must be secondary, end quote.
Gotta love the Christian attitude. The text doesn't support what I think, so we'll just rewrite it because the text is obviously wrong. I couldn't possibly be wrong.
The Septuagint has Yoshaphat. That should settle it right there.
Should.
Right, because it's the original, of course.
Came first.
Mm-hmm. On verse 11, he used to pour water on the hands of Elijah. This expression is otherwise unknown. Rashi wrote that Elisha poured water on the hands of Elisha on Mount Carmel, as we see in 1 Kings 18:34. And, quote, with his pouring, his fingers became like springs of water until the until the ditch filled up. And it is therefore fitting for a miracle to be performed for us through him concerning water, end quote.
Are we saying Elisha was a waterbender?
I think.
Yeah, I mentioned this. Rashi mentioned that story when we were talking about that, Elijah and the bulls, the Baal prophets.
Yeah. Targum reads, Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who served Elisha. Talmud Yerushalmi Eruvin 5:1 reads, Rabbi Chelbo, in the name of those of the house of Shiloh, said, quote, even when Eliyahu wanted water for his face, Elisha would put it on his hands, end quote. Likewise...
Couldn't that just be a way of describing an attendant or a servant?
I'm getting to it.
Okay.
I thought so.
Likewise, Cogan writes that the expression seems to be related to one of the servant's roles, to bring water so that his master might wash his hands with it. And Josephus in Antiquities 9:33 reads, Elisha, the disciple of Elisha.
It is fairly typical for a guru or spiritual leader to have his disciples perform menial tasks for him as part of the, working your way up the spiritual ladder vibe.
On verse 12, the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom. Tanchuma Bovel Pinchas 5 reads, "Why is Jehoshaphat not called a king here? In order to make known the humility of that righteous man, in that he did not want to go down before the prophet in royal garb, but as a commoner." Some also say it was because an edict had been decreed that he would be killed with Achab that the scriptural text has reckoned the reign of his son from that hour. For that reason, king was not written, but as a reward for their going down to the prophet, they attained the right to see all those miracles.
Goody.
On verse 13, "Why do you want to involve me?" Sweeney comments, "By depicting Elisha's distaste for Jehoram, the narrative builds the case for the overthrow of the house of Omri. The prophet's question to Jehoram, 'Why have you come to me?' and his contemptuous statement to the king that he should consult the prophets of his father and mother, see 1 Kings 18, tie this episode into the literary framework of the Elijah-Elisha traditions that constitute the basis for the Jehu history. Elisha's curt dismissal provides Jehoram with the opportunity once again to demonstrate his lack of trust in Yahweh. Elisha's statement that he would not even consider Jehoram's request were it not for the presence of Jehoshaphat reiterates the generally high regard for the Judean king expressed elsewhere in 1 Kings 22:7 and 41 through 46. On that same verse, "It was the Lord who called us 3 kings together." Targum adds before the sentence, quote, "Please do not recall sins in this hour, beg for mercies upon us." That's it. On 15, "Bring me a harpist." In Hebrew, it's menagen. In the Hebrew Bible, the root nun gimel nun refers to playing a stringed instrument, as we see in 1 Samuel 16:16, 18:10, and 19:9, and Isaiah 23:16, etc. Thus, the Septuagint and Josephus in Antiquities 935 render a harpist. Targum reads, "A man who knows how to play on the lyre." Traditionals wrote that Elisha asked for a musician because of his anger. Based on Talmud Shabbat 30b, quote, "The divine presence, i.e. the Shekhinah, rests from the joy of a mitzvah," end quote. Or Talmud Pesachim 66b, which states that the divine presence departed from him because of his anger towards Jehoram. We have seen in 1 Samuel 10:5 and 6 how music is used to help a group of prophets to prophecy. And Sweeney comments, quote, "Elisha's instructions that the musician play while he receives Yahweh's oracle illuminate the dynamics of oracular inquiry. The well-crafted poetic forms of oracular discourse are known from the prophetic books, but musical accompaniment is rarely indicated. The Egyptian prophecy of Nefertiti relates a scene in which Pharaoh Snefru summons the lector priest Neferohu to deliver choice speeches for the entertainment of the royal court. Music is not mentioned in this account, but the poetic speech of the lector priest points to artistic composition intended for public performance. Also 1 Samuel 10:5 and 6, 1 Chronicles 25, 2 Chronicles 20, etc.
I have observed that prophecy is usually written in poetic forms. And as you pointed out, there are several occasions where music is used to invoke the divine. I would think most notably with Saul, one, to drive away the evil spirits, but even earlier, I think, which you mentioned in Samuel when he was first crowned, how he got singing and everything with the, a bunch of prophets and then prophesied with them, and is Saul also amongst the prophets and whatnot. So it's interesting too, because I know from church, and Mark, I'm sure you've observed this, although I don't know if you ever put this language to it, whipping people into states of ecstasy by use of music and performance is a very common strategy of religious practitioners. And particularly, I know in my experience, probably also in yours, you would have techniques that you can actually recognize as being deliberately and explicitly actively hypnotic techniques. You could study hypnotism, and basically they would tell you how to do an evangelical worship service, and whipping people up into a frenzy and getting them into this highly emotional state, and then, you know, playing 65 renditions of the same stanza while you call everyone to come forward and pray and pour out their heart and tell you all their deepest, darkest secrets because altar call. And you probably did some backsliding. But it seems that at least the technique of poetry and art and music as a way to invoke the divine, though perhaps not always quite so vulgarly as that, is pretty well established here.
Yeah,
and
they've been doing
elsewhere.
it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
God, the altar calls.
What do you say about the 65 stanzas?
Ugh.
I took my kids to a Krishna temple, and they start chanting the mantra.
Mm.
The funny thing was that an hour and a half into that, my then young son asked me, "How long is this song?"
And you can induce an ecstatic state. And honestly, if you just want to vibe with that, I don't have a problem with it. But then they'll try and tell you that because you got into a hypnotic state, that means it's God and you should, let us control your life and give us all your money.
Having sat in many creativity meetings at church planning, serious planning meetings, it's amazing how intentional some of these churches can be about even the specifics of, we're going to transition from this prayer onto something that is on a minor key. So we're going to do this song because we're trying to evoke this feeling. And it's just like they plan these things way in advance. Like it's nothing sporadic. It's really well thought out. Yeah.
Well, I think there can be some improvisation when you have a good, established dynamic between the players already. But absolutely, the myth is that it's when the Spirit moves us, we'll just go to the chorus that the Lord leads us to. And I'm like, sure, Jan. I'm glad to hear that I'm right and that it is that manipulated by.
Oh yeah. We're gonna build them up, or we're gonna tear them down. Like that's very intentional.
They say that they're gonna tear us down.
Well, we need a moment of internal dialogue, repentance, reflection, so they know what kind of music to play and the kind of things to say to facilitate that experience that everyone.
For sure. I mean, I knew the planned music is usually lined up with whatever the sermon is going to be on, so there's some natural coordination there. But wow.
By the way, this is Ashira. I'm trying to train her to turn into a pole.
Hello, Ashira. Who's a good little danger noodle?
That's funny because Asherah, right, is the god, and I mean in Hebrew, I guess you would kind of say it like Asherah or Asherah. How would you say it, Tomera?
Asherah.
Okay, but Ashira is also a name, and it means
because it's supposed to be Asherah. I said it a weird way that I don't normally.
Okay. Ashira is means like a song. If you've ever seen Prince of Egypt, they're singing. They're like Ashira, Ashira.
I mean,
and Ashira means let's sing, but it's also a girl's name.
Ashira also is a feminine for a rich woman.
Also, I learned recently in Arabic, Ashura is the word for 10.
Oh.
Yeah, similar. Yeah, that's like Hebrew is Esther. Oh.
Yeah.
That's very similar.
Okay, on 16 and 17, Yahweh informs that the valley will be full of pools, so in Hebrew, Gevim. Although Josephus in Antiquities 935 and Kimchi wrote that Yahweh commanded the kings to dig out many pits in the stream, McKenzie writes that from the prediction that water will appear without signs of storm and the pronouncement of the event as an easy thing in Nakal in verse 18, this implies a miracle, and thus favors the reading that Yahweh will create pools filled with water. Likewise, Cogan writes that the valley will be full of pools filled with water without any rain appearing. He writes, quote, "The writing depicts a known desert phenomenon. The cisterns and holes in the wadi are filling up from floods coming from far away, and they preserve the water even after the area surrounding it has dried." On verse 19, "You will cut down every good tree." This seems to contradict the commandment in Deuteronomy 20:19. Rashi comments, quote, "Even though it is stated to do not harm any of its trees in Deuteronomy 20:19, here he, i.e. God, permitted it for you, for this is a contemptible and insignificant nation before him. And scripture states, you shall not pursue their peace and their benefit in Deuteronomy 23:7, i.e. these are the good trees that are among them," end quote. Kimchi wrote that either Deuteronomy 20:19 only applies during a siege, or that he, quote, "commanded them for the hour," end quote, in Hebrew, mitzvah l'sha'ah, like Elijah at Mount Carmel, who sacrificed a burnt offering during the prohibition against the high places. Likewise, McKenzie writes that Deuteronomy 20:15 and 16, quote, "signals a distinction between warfare against distant cities and warfare against those in the promised land, and the prohibition in verses 19 and 20 is in the latter category. Since Moab was outside of the land, this prohibition did not apply," end quote. Nevertheless, Sweeney writes that this indicates the non-Deuteronomistic early origin of this narrative, which was only later worked into the DH framework. And Fritz writes that the addition is likely the work of a Deuteronomistic redactor. Cogan notes Rendsburg's opinion that Elisha is seeking revenge. According to him, Elisha was from the tribe of Gad, which suffered from incursions by Mesha, and the Israelite army's behavior was acceptable for the period, as we see from the Mesha Stele, where Mesha boasts about killing all the people. Assyrian sources report of destroying crops by the Assyrian army as punishment, usually in cases of prolonged siege over cities about to be occupied.
Can I get a
sorry.
confirmation on the pronunciation? You just said Stele, right?
Oh, God.
Which
So,
earlier was
I
pronounced.
think we looked it up.
This is pronounced like in multiple ways. I usually pronounce it Steel.
Steel.
I've heard Stella, Steely. I've heard
Steely
Earlier today
apparently
we
is
heard
one of the
Steely.
more-
yeah,
Steely
I've heard it a
apparently
bunch
is,
of
like,
different
quite common.
ways. They're none of.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say any of them are wrong.
Isn't
I don't
Steely
care.
the
Stella is
plural?
from Latin.
Stella Steely? No.
What does Isaac have to say? I'm going with the Brit on English.
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
Rock.
I think people say Steely or Steel, or Still or Steely. Yeah.
Either way, the thing is, we all know what we're talking about,
Yeah.
so I don't actually care how people pronounce it.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
I think it's more American.
As
to say
everybody
Steely.
should.
Stele.
Okay, so on verse
I
22.
think that's the plural.
On verse
On verse-
22.
Okay.
Yeah. Rashi
22?
explains. Isaac.
Sorry, you said verse 22?
Yes,
Oh my
22.
God, that's so
Okay,
funny.
Okay.
Honestly, our relationship is just. On verse 22, Rashi explained that since Moab saw the water at a distance, and since they've never seen water in that valley, they thought it was blood. Sweeney explains that the presence of reddish-hued pools, quote, is a natural phenomena in the aftermath of rain and flooding in the red sandstone landscape at sunrise, end quote. Fritz, however, writes that the mistaken perception of the Moabites is exaggerated to a degree that renders the whole sequence of events unlikely. He writes, quote, the narrator has obviously only a vague idea of the natural conditions on the Edomite steppe, recalled from a geographical and historical distance. Hens-Piazza comments, quote, water, which is a gift of life for Israel now, becomes a source of death for the enemy. When the Moabites see the water, it appears red from the vantage point. Whether the color was because of the reflection of the sun or because of the red sandstone of the wadis is uncertain. However, the parallel with the plagues of Egypt makes certain that just as the prophet foretold, the hand of the Lord is acting on behalf of Israel. End quote.
Yeah, I did want to mention because you we might have gone past it already, but did you talk about how chopping down trees is actually not allowed?
Yes.
He did.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Good. Just making sure.
You never listen to anything that I say, Isaac. We need to go to counseling sometimes.
John 73, John says, should rename this show Tomer and the 5 people who won't let him finish a commentary.
I guess. I
What
guess.
Isaac,
about,
send your boy flowers.
Sorry, I was just quickly looking up some dates.
Of course you did.
What about the time of the grain offering? Did you talk about that as well?
Time of the grain offering. When was that?
That's verse 20.
No, not really.
Because normally the time of the grain offering or the mincha is in the afternoon, not in the morning. So, I mean, Rashi is like, yeah, it started in the morning, and then the afternoon was when it came time for the grain offering. That's when the water came in. Like the morning, it rained in Edom in the morning, and then by the time of the grain offering, the water came rushing through the wadi, which is one way of fixing it. But I still find it. I don't think that's probably what this originally meant, and I wonder if there actually was maybe when this was written, if that was maybe the time of the grain offering was in the morning, or something like that. Be
It's
interesting.
possible.
So Sweeney writes that although some see the reference to the time of the mincha offering as an indication that this narrative is late, ancient Israelite religion was centered around the institution of temples, priesthoods, and sacrificial rituals throughout the entire monarchic period. The mincha was a serial offering, Leviticus 2, that followed the daily olah or whole burnt offering.
Okay, so he's saying that people might think it's anachronistic because the establishment of the mincha would have been like, priestly and much later. Okay.
I guess.
Or
Yeah.
at the
So maybe
I mean,
maybe it's not
offerings
anachronistic, and maybe it's
typical.
referring to like a completely different type of, it's just an offering of grains that were from a different period in time when it wasn't it wasn't the priest that they had later on. Maybe, could have been a complete different system with grain offerings in the morning. Who knows? Crazy stuff like that, and spontaneous dancing at precisely 5 p.m.
Yeah. Okay, so on verse 25, Kil Haraseth. Early translations read Kil as wall. Thus, Septuagint reads, until they left the stones of the walls overturned. Vulgate, so that brick walls only remained. Targum, until the stone was not left in the wall. And Peshita, until all that was left was some stones in the wall that they had broken down. Likewise, Josephus in Antiquities 941 reads, they leveled the walls to the ground. Most traditionals render the clay in the wall, and that they would take stones from the walls until it was only left with their clay. Kimchi, however, writes that this refers to a large Moabite town, mentioned in Isaiah 16:7-11, Jeremiah 48:31-36, as Kil-Cheres, and because that city had a name, Scripture mentioned it, and did not recall the other towns that were destroyed. Likewise, modern commentators generally identify Kil-Haraseth as the capital of Moab. Fritz writes that the site can be located at El Kerak at the center of the Moabite plateau. McKenzie, however, notes that Jones has shown the weakness of this identification and proposed a location north of the Arnon. He takes Kil-Haraseth, city of shards, to be a taunt name.
That does sound appropriate. City of
Yeah, I mean-
Shards would be a taunt name.
Yeah.
The
I mean,
shard.
the from the Mesha Stele, we see, they have place names that they see as their capital or important, and they don't mention this. So,
Mhm.
maybe it's similar to what was it? Kharsa? No, Karcha. Maybe it's similar enough to that. But
Now, you have two comments on verse 27, but they're both long. So I'll start on Then he took his firstborn son, who succeeded him as king, and offered him as sacrifice on the city wall. Cogan notes that this is the only instance in the Hebrew Bible in which child sacrifice is used during a time of crisis. The case of the daughter of Jephthah in Judges 11, 30, and 31 is different and is defined as paying a vow. He notes that classical sources report of child sacrifice in Phoenicia and its North African settlements during a siege, as we see in Eusebius in Praeparatio Evangelica 1:1044 and Diodorus in Bibliotheca Historia 20:14 4-6. Fritz, however, writes that there is no evidence for child sacrifice from any of the surrounding areas of Israel, and that it is unlikely that child sacrifice was practiced anywhere in the larger environment of Israel, which makes the allegation reflect rather more on the narrator and his circle. He further writes, quote, "This tendentiousness reveals the story to be a piece of anti-Moabite propaganda and unlikely to correspond to reality. The
You
only
mean there's
historical..."
portions of the Bible that aren't true?
Yes, Aaron.
Shock. Yeah, the propaganda is strong in this one. I definitely get that vibe.
So the only historical element is the establishment of Moab as an independent political power on which the story is based. Apart from that, nothing can be historically verified. Rather than being a factual account of a campaign against the Moab, the narrative reflects the desire at least to discredit the Moabites, even if they could not be beaten. A tendentious compilation without any historical value, it was possibly composed only by the Deuteronomistic redactor. It contains no significant historical detail apart from commonplaces familiar from military accounts, and cannot therefore be considered as a source for the history of Israel. An Israelite invasion of Moab never took place, and the battles fought over the cities on the plateau north of the Arnon, which are mentioned in the Mesha inscription, do not appear in biblical historiography.
So we have two interpretations. Either the Bible does support child sacrifice, since the guy sacrificed his child and therefore they won the battle when they were losing. So that was God favoring him for accepting the child sacrifice rather than forbidding child sacrifice. Or the other way to interpret this is that there are parts of the Bible that are not literal, that are not metaphorical. They're just false. They're propaganda that other people made up and stuck in there that have no truth to them at all.
In fairness to Jehovah, this particular child sacrifice was not directed at him. It was done by the Moabite king, presumably to gain the favor of their own gods, or scare the crap out of the Israelites. But yeah, it's
definitely
smells like
ambiguous.
bullshit.
Yeah,
you
I
could
mean,
even
I-
read it. You could even read it as, because the verse before is he tried to, break through again to the king of Edom and then failed, and then the next verse is, and he took his son who was to become king after him. Like, who is him is ambiguous, so it could be referring to, that Mesha took his own son, but it could also be Mesha took the son of the king of Edom, who he might have had as a hostage, and sacrificed him up on the wall, and which caused the Edomites to retreat or whatever, which could have changed the battle or whatever. So that's like one way of reading it as well.
Yeah, I have I have a long comment on this
Yeah, I'm
regarding
sure.
what the fury is. So, okay, so the fury against Israel was great. Hebrew for fury is ketzef. It is unclear what the fury refers to. Cogan even calls it, quote, one of the most embarrassing passages of the Bible, end quote. Yeah. Commentators are generally divided in regard to the origin of the wrath, quote unquote, and they are usually divided into three groups. The first is that it refers to Chemosh's wrath, with Chemosh being the national deity of Moab. Cogan notes that many commentators see the wrath, quote unquote, as a reaction of the Moabite deity, who accepted Mesha's sacrifice and has struck the Israelite armies. Several scholars, like Kittel, Shanda, and Gray, argued that the hypothetical admission of the power of a non-Israelite deity was erased in the late editing phases of the Bible. McKenzie notes that Westbrook argued that Mesha's sacrifice, quote, sought to appease Chemosh for the violation of his, i.e. Mesha's oath, by Chemosh to keep his vassal treaty with Israel, end quote. Likewise, Kip Davis on my Discord writes, quote, "The most sensible way to read the text is that
Excuse you?
I knew it.
Excuse
Yes.
you.
Yes, it's a fact now. Deal with it. So he writes, the most sensible way to read the text is that Mesha's sacrifice was efficacious, Chemosha's wrath overcame the Israelites, and Yahweh was not able or willing to intervene." End quote. Now, I see Aaron. Yeah, okay. So the second group is that it refers to Yahweh's wrath. Hens-Piazza writes that this wrath could not be an expression of Chemosh, since the author of the texts believes only in Yahweh. And, quote, "That the wrath comes upon Israel, and Israel responds, indicates their perception that indeed this is the Lord's wrath upon them." End quote. Likewise, McKenzie writes that Israelite tradition shied away from ascribing power to a foreign deity, and used the ambiguous great wrath without identifying the source. He writes, quote, "The larger context of the story and its outcome indicate that this is Yahweh's doing. The three kings are saved from catastrophe and even given victory over Moab because of righteous Jehoshaphat. At the same time, Yoram, who is clearly a wicked Omride as Elisha intimates, suffers the loss of his vassal. This is accomplished by an act of God that forces Israel to abandon the field and its otherwise successful quest. The righteous king prospers, the evil one suffers, and it is all easy for Yahweh to do." End quote. Now, and the third group is that it refers to a wrath from a different source. Traditionals like Kimchi and Gersonides wrote that the king of Edom was angry towards Jehoram and Jehoshaphat, who did not help him, whilst Mesha kidnapped his son and sacrificed him atop the wall.
So that's coming in with that reading. Isaac advocated that some people were trying to say, "Oh, it wasn't his son; it was the other son. He must have
Yeah, I think it's
kidnapped him in the press."
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Clearly,
Kimchi
they did
and
not defeat Moab.
yeah.
Moab won,
Yeah.
and you know,
they have to
Yahweh got
explain
his
it
ass
away, but they just like it's like one little sentence at the end where it's like, and then we went home. Like,
because
Yeah.
that's what we always do. Just
Yeah.
we were totally winning. We just had to go home for reasons, unspecified reasons.
yeah. I mean,
I think
Steinsaltz has like a whole like write up, and he's trying to explain it like, the king of Moab demonstrated his devotion to his god by sacrificing that which was dearest to him, his own son and heir, as a burnt offering upon the city wall. Even among the Canaanites, human sacrifice was uncommon. The infamous rite of Molech mainly consisted of symbolic actions. Although children were passed alive through fire, they were not actually burnt. Therefore, there was great wrath and denunciation from God against the less dedicated Israel. The divine attribute of judgment was aroused against Israel. How could it be that this Moabite king is prepared to sacrifice his own son, whereas you are not fully devoted to his will? Of course, he doesn't want human sacrifice, but he does want his worshippers to entirely commit to his service.
So
Yeah.
God is pissed off that the Israelites are not quite as eager to burn their children for him because that's a lack of commitment. Well, that is a perspective.
But then he
So-
just says, apparently, as a result of this extreme action, the soldiers came to the conclusion that the war was no longer worthwhile. Okay.
Okay, so others, like Ibn Kaspi and Abravanel, wrote that the wrath came from the Israelites who were furious over the sacrifice. Likewise, Cogan notes that several scholars see the Israelites' anger as emanating from the siege, which brought to the horrible sacrifice, according to Thenius, and caused panic and loss of morale of the besieged, according to C.F. Keel and Montgomery and Geman. Fritz writes that the siege is abandoned, quote, out of disgust at the sacrifice by the king of Moab, end quote. Sweeney writes that the reference to the anger must be read as upon Israel, LeYisra'el, i.e., Israel became angry at the sight of Mesha's sacrifice of his son, and consequently withdrew from Kir Haraseth. Thus, Israel/Jehoram were responsible for the failure to achieve victory over the Moabites, and not Yahweh. And Cogan argues that the solution to this exegetical embarrassment, quote unquote, should be found in the author's attitude towards the house of Omri. Quote, he couldn't accept Jehoram's victory, a descendant of the dynasty doomed for destruction, according to 1 Kings 21, 21, and 22, and so inserted into the story a tradition that he had regarding the Ketzef, which because of it, the Israelite army left Moab without them achieving the goal of the campaign, returning Moab to Israel's rule. Thus, he diminished Jehoram's achievements in spite of the prophet's support, and did not let the last Almighty king enjoy the fruits of his victory. End quote.
Yeah. I mean, Rashi has an interesting take, and I think it's based on like a midrash in the Talmud, which is I don't know, a pesikta. I'm not sure exactly what that is.
Pesikta Rabati, I think.
Oh, okay. It's a specific midrash, right? Or is it not a
Pesikta of Kahana 2:5.
okay. Yeah, so the king asked his servants, "What is the character of this nation that miracles such as these were performed for them?" They replied, "Their forefather Abraham had an only son. The Holy One, blessed he, said to him, 'Offer him before me,' and he wanted to sacrifice him to the Holy One, blessed is he. He said to them, 'I too have a firstborn son. I will go and sacrifice him to the gods.'" So he took inspiration from Abraham.
Oh, that's a lovely thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I only have one Christian for this chapter, and
And
that
there's
is
also-
sorry.
Wait, there's one more comment by Rashi, which is the word choma is written without a vav, so it's just 3 letters, and it's the same 3 letters as chama, which is
Yeah.
the sun. So he was worshipping the sun, which Chemosh is Chemosh a sun god? Don't think so. It sounds a bit like Shemesh, but I don't think it is the same. I don't think it's like a Moabite version of
The
Shemesh.
Jews haven't been very good about accurately representing the religion of their neighbors thus far. So,
Yeah, I mean that he doesn't mention Chemosh is not mentioned, right?
Wait.
Not in this story.
Yes.
No, he's not mentioned. He's mentioned in others in the
Yeah,
Bible,
yeah.
but he's not mentioned
Yeah, that's
here.
why we get the Hebrew pronunciation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I only have one Christian, and that is Ephraim, who writes that as in the miracle of Elisha, water flowed to fill the wadi, so after Christ's passion, the sources were immediately opened, and rivers of living water flowed on the nations of the Gentiles. Yeah,
What?
that's it. Yeah.
It sounds a bit like the tradition that I grew up with, where when Moses split the river, when he split the Red Sea or the Sea of Reeds, it happened all around the world.
Yeah.
So if you had like a jug of water, it would have split.
I can quote him. I can quote him. This is from the second book
same
of Kings
time.
3:16. He writes that after the Christ had brought to perfection on the wood of the cross the new glory of our Savior, the sources were immediately opened, and rivers of living water flowed on the nations of the Gentiles, who are symbolized by the wadi, as Jesus said before his passion. And this quotes from JN. Is that John 7:37 and 38? In this way, the word of the prophet might be fulfilled. He who has played the harp will play for the Gentiles in the name of the Lord. Psalms 108:3.
Wow. That's it. That's what the Christians have to say about this chapter. Okay.
I mean, yeah. I mean, that's just Ephraim. So,
Just saying, like, they
you
seem to
weren't
have this thing
expecting
where it's
anything
like-
sensible, were you?
Yeah, it's like most of the Old Testament is just filler. It's only when it maybe has something to do with Jesus are they interested.
Well, thankfully, Jesus called himself a light and salt and bread and water, living water. So, anything that involves any of these extremely rare and unique items can be used to prefigure Jesus because feels.
I see somebody in the chat says that talk to Aaron. I'm going to be on the line again on Monday. So if there is somebody out there who wants to have a chat with me, go ahead and do that. Call in when I'm on.
Sounds fun. But I
Yeah,
think
that's
they
something I think
might have
I
meant that you were.
already invited
banished.
him. He doesn't want to talk about his religion on camera. He only wants to talk about his religion in this chat.
Well, he doesn't seem
Where
to
it doesn't
want,
matter
because he
and
just,
no one will remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
he
Well,
doesn't seem
and
to
where
actually
there's a
want to talk
character
about.
limit and nobody can fully answer him because shit's more complicated.
Yeah, I don't think he actually wants to talk about his religion. I think he just wants to say that he wants to talk about religion, because that's all he's been doing.
Pretty
Just-
much.
Just saying that he wants
Pretty
to talk
much.
about. Yeah.
We're all very impressed. Anyway.
Yeah.
Who's a good little baby? Who's a good little baby?
Don't.
I will
He's
love
not
the
talking to
flute.
you.
I'm talking to the cat, obviously. The only gods worthy of worship have toe beans.
All right, Tomer, are you ready for
Toby.
me to take on?
Yes, but let me just check when you should finish this. 23. Read up to 23.
Okay, so 2 kings squared. Right.
Yeah.
Now the wife of a member of the company of prophets cried to Elisha, "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord, but a creditor has come to take my 2 children as slaves." Elisha said to her, "What shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in the house?" She answered, "Your servant has nothing in the house except a jar of oil." He said, "Go outside, borrow vessels from all your neighbors, empty vessels, and not just a few. Then go in, shut the door behind you and your children, and start pouring into all of these vessels. When each is full, set it aside." So she left him and shut the door behind her and her children. They kept bringing vessels to her, and she kept pouring. When the vessels were full, she said to her son, "Bring another vessel." But he said to her, "There are no more." Then the oil stopped flowing. She came and told the man of God, and he said, "Go sell the oil and pay your debts, and you and your children can live on the rest." One day, Elisha was passing through Shunem, where a wealthy woman lived, who urged him to have a meal. So whenever he passed that way, he would stop there for a meal. She said to her husband, "Look, I am sure that this man who regularly passes our way is a holy man of God. Let us make a small roof chamber with walls and put there for him a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp, so that he can stay here whenever he comes to us." One day when he came there, he went up to the chamber and laid down there. He said to the servant Gehazi, "Call the Shunammite woman." And when he called her, she stood before him. He said to him, I'm a little confused. That was a woman he's talking to, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's like I think it's like later on, right?
Okay.
If I'm mistaken.
He said to him, "Say to her,
Ooh.
since you have taken all this trouble for us, what may be done for you? Would you have a word spoken on your behalf to the king or to the commander of the army?" She answered, "I live among my people." He said, "What then may be done for her?" Gehazi answered, "Well, she has no son, and her husband is old." He said, "Call her." When he had called her, she stood at the door. He said, "At this season, in due time, you shall embrace a son." She replied, "No, my lord, O man of God, do not deceive your servant." The woman conceived and bore a son at that season, in due time, as Elisha had declared to her. When the child was older, he went out one day to his father among the reapers. He complained to his father, "Oh, my head, my head." The father said to his servant, "Carry him to his mother." He carried him and brought him to the mother. The child sat on her lap until noon, and he died. She then went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, closed the door on him, and left. She called to her husband and said, "Send me one of the servants and one of the donkeys, so that I may quickly go to the man of God and come back again." He said, "Why go to him today? It's neither new moon nor Sabbath. She said, it will be all right. Then she
Okay.
saddled the donkey
No,
and
no,
said
that's it.
to her-
That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it.
Okay.
That's it.
You
That's
said 20. I thought you said
23.
28.
I said
Sorry.
23.
23. Okay, go ahead.
Yep.
So this would be one of the first things that is paralleled. In fact, this this chapter has it has a feeding narrative as well, which is taken up
Yeah.
by
Yeah,
early
100
Christians.
people.
But the same thing with the oil
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
like it's in with the same motif. But no, it's kind of interesting to me with this son, right? He kind of takes, because we have many narratives, especially in the Torah, where God says like you're gonna have a son, even though it's like it seems like impossible. You know, that's why she's like, do not deceive your servant. But then she does end up conceiving. Bummer that he died so early, but
Yeah.
yeah, he kind of takes the place of God in that way. That he's able to say, yeah, you're gonna have a son.
I wouldn't have thought it as taking the place of God, but I
Well,
guess
not
I
not
can
not,
see.
but he's taking his role there.
There is a distinction that, like, Samuel's mother, for example, begged for a child, and there is this idea of women asking God for a child and then potentially being granted, whereas this one, it's Elisha's servant who suggests she doesn't have a kid. I bet she wants a kid, and she's like, don't get my hopes up. So clearly, she did, but she never asked the man of God for it. There's also a real echoing in the whole story with the, Elijah and the widow, except that was with one character where, she feeds him and then he stays with her. And then, the food doesn't run out because God magic. And then the kid dies and he saves the kid, same kid. Whereas this is more divided among two different women, one of whom is poor, one of whom is rich. And the poor woman also has the multiplying food miracle, but this time in order to sell and pay off her debts and keep her sons out of slavery, which is admittedly a good cause.
Also, the rich woman lives in Shunem and is called the Shunammite, which is, I think, with Elijah, it's she's also called a Shunammite, but she's given a name. So what is it, Avishag? Yeah, Avishag.
Oh,
the
that's not
Shunammite.
Elisha. That's
No.
David.
Abishag
Oh
the
yeah.
Shunammite
You're right.
was-
Yeah, that's way
but
early
the
on.
one that
Yeah.
Kings.
previously was the wife of Naboth, who died
Though it's
mysteriously
interesting.
before toxicology reports.
Right. Oh yeah, Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer says
Um,
that she was the sister of Avishag, and
yeah.
some also identify
Though-
her as the mother of Iddo the prophet.
Or Obadiah. No, Obadiah. Not Edo.
Well, this child is
The-
well, Habakkuk.
Oh no, the son is Ido or Habakkuk according to the Zohar. But
Yeah.
they
Because,
But we shouldn't really be listening to the Zohar. They got some crazy shit in there.
Well, it's literally
Yeah.
based on the idea that Habakkuk sounds a bit like chibuk, which means to hug, which is the verb used in
Adorable.
verse.
Yeah.
Where does it say you will hug your son this time next year, whatever?
Yeah.
I think it says chobeket.
I do
That's
find it touch disturbing that, like, the whole thing where she doesn't tell her husband that the kid is dead and just says, no, everything's fine, I'm just going to go visit the prophet. That, I don't know, Mark, with your experience, how much you had to deal with.
Don't go in
healing
the spare room.
culture.
It's a mess.
Yeah. I don't know how much you had to deal with Christian healing culture. I have hella trauma around that. But there is absolutely with the ministers who will sell the idea that God will heal you from your illness if you just yada yada yada, that you must part of demonstrating your faith is to deny the reality of your illness and to say it's, I claim the promise that this illness is, defeated, and then go forward to act as though you don't have the illness that you in fact do have. And a lot of people have died that way.
We actually had some very good dear friends of ours that I remember that when their kids were little, they would oftentimes not give them any fever medication when they got sick because they thought that prayer should be enough. And there was maybe one or two times where it was a little scary, where I think some friends had to intervene and say, hey, you really need to take your kid to the doctor. So it can be pretty dangerous.
It absolutely can be. People died, their children have died. And also there's been horrible lives full of tortured, misapplied hope where people, contrive the most ridiculous rituals to try and prove their faith to a God who isn't going to heal them. And it sometimes directly denying medical intervention, sometimes just medical intervention ends up delayed and befuddled by all this nonsense.
Somebody commented to me a couple days ago that this is the first video I've ever seen of you, and I'm disgusted because all you do is criticize the Bible without reading it for yourself. Yeah,
as we literally painstakingly dissect every word.
And the last couple chapters are, I don't know, the last one in particular is pretty meaty, I think, for all the people that say that the best way to become an atheist is to read the Bible, that one chapter is a good citation to make the point.
It's certainly never dissuaded my atheism.
All right, so Trevor and Wright says, 2 Kings 3, in terms of Israel's relationship to the Moabites, who historical lived in the ancient Levant region, how significant were these groups among other Levantine ethnic groups?
So if we're just talking about are we just talking about the Moabites and King Mesha?
Well, let's start there, yeah.
Because we have a preserved stele from him, so I would say that's already pretty significant. You could say he's some sort of he was a ruler, right? He was a king, so he must have had some amount of significance.
Yeah, it seems that post Bronze Age collapse, Canaanite people, you've got the Israelites, the Moabites, Edomites, and Ammonites, and that's pretty much the only ones that are and then Phoenicians, where they're kind of northern Canaanite.
Or I don't know if he's asking about other groups as well.
Well,
so the Ammonites would be included in that. The Amorites, there are a whole bunch of smaller groups too.
There were a lot of warring, tribal kings and emperors, and in everybody's individual group's history, they will always write that they were the biggest and the strongest and the most important, and yet they may not even be considered significant enough to be mentioned by their neighbors. So, it's hard to get a more objective view of who was really the strongest or the most important. And obviously, that would change at different points in history. Who's got the biggest army, the biggest stick in 300 years is gonna.
And all of this stuff that we're reading about, assuming that we're reading the parts that pertain to something that actually happened. Let's go 1,000 miles in any direction and see if it matters.
Probably not.
No.
John Klein gifted one RN Raw membership, and then My Unfinished Journey offers $2 and says, "Don't evangelize in chat, like and share instead." Thank you.
Also waiting on the comment from My Unfinished Sock now.
Q Continuum says, is there clarification for why the dialogue confuses who is talking? I was having a problem with that. I just thought it was badly written.
I mean, it seems to just be like, he doesn't talk to her directly. He talks to his servant, who then talks to her. It seems a bit, maybe not rude, but like, I don't know. They decided to make him come off as some sort of noble, and like tell her blah blah blah, even though she's standing right there. But then the next verse does say like, call her. So yeah, it's a bit confusing because he says like, she stood before him, and then we have them talking in private, and then like call her again, and then she's standing in the doorway. So maybe stand before him doesn't necessarily mean in the same room. Maybe she was outside. Yeah.
I would say maybe it's just a way to introduce Gehazi, right? Because of the narrative in the next chapter. But the thing is that chapter already has an introduction to him. So like it isn't really necessary.
Yeah, he said like called. Yeah, he tells his servant call her. He called her, and she stood before him. Then we have he said to him blah blah blah, and he replied, and then yeah, it's a bit strange.
It also seems odd how Gehazi is able to get there like so much quicker than them.
Even though there is a tradition that he was going along, like telling every person he met that he's going to revive the dead, but that's just like I guess a later idea that he wasn't a good guy because he like took money as well later.
Yeah, he got leprosy for that, didn't he?
Yeah.
God likes to mess up people's skin. Acne is God's punishment on teenagers for being douchebags.
Okay, so I'll start on verse 1. The wife of a man from the company of the prophets. Ever since the Second Temple period, the woman has been identified as the wife of Obadiah, Ahab's servant, who saved 100 prophets of Yahweh from Jezebel, as we see in 1 Kings 18. The identification is found in Jewish literature, like Josephus in Antiquities 947, Targum Rabbi Mani in Midrash Tanchuma Kitesa 5, and most traditionals. And in Christian literature, according to Ephraim and Theodoret. Cogan writes that this is based on his description in 1 Kings 18 verses 3 and 12 that he revered Yahweh greatly.
Yeah. And then also the bit where he's like, the creditors are coming. So the idea is like, in order to try and save these prophets, he borrowed money from the king, from one of the princes, who becomes king later, Jehoram. And then so Jehoram gave lent him with interest, which is also very evil.
Yeah, actually I have a comment on this. His creditor is coming to take my two boys as his slaves. Rashi, based on Tanchuma Mishpatim 9, wrote that this was Jehoram who would lend him with interest, enabling him to sustain the prophets in his father's time. Hens-Piazza explains that this act is legitimized by the Hebrew legal system in Exodus 21:7, and slavery for unpaid debts was an accepted practice in ancient Israel. She notes that this was a constant threat to the poorest of the peasants throughout Israel's history, as we see in Amos 2:6, 8:8, and Micah 2:9. Without any economic support from her husband or sons, quote, in a patriarchal society, a widow who loses her children is particularly vulnerable, end quote.
Yeah,
Isn't that just
it's
delightful?
technically against, like, I guess, later developments in, like, halacha, like Jewish law. It's against, you're not allowed to, like, sell children into slavery to pay a debt of the father. But it seems to be that at least when this was written, that was either okay, or, the North Israel was, they didn't punish it.
Do you ever wonder if some of the more compassionate laws were written in so that they could condemn retroactively condemn people who had done this or that
Solomon.
thing, which was totally acceptable at the time, but they're like,
Yeah.
no, they're just, then especially the priestly voice, you're coming in like, oh no, this guy, we have to vilify him because he, whatever. And then, what did he do? Well, he did this. Okay, well, that's now a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, if a bad guy does something if there's someone that you hate and he does something which is like, maybe before that it wasn't seen as that bad, but because he did it, it's become so much more terrible. It can change the outlook, right? If you go extreme, right? Before the Second World War, like anti-Semitism in Europe wasn't like this big deal. No one really cared about it. But now that the bad guy, the guy who tried to invade us and fought a war with us, was anti-Semitic, now it becomes something that he did, so that's evil. We can't emulate that. So I'm sure things like that have happened all the time, right? Some king was bad, but he was also, a glutton. So now gluttony is bad, or there was some king and he was like, he really badly ruled the empire, but he was also a cross-dresser, and now cross-dressing is morally bad,
Because these are
Looking
very
at you,
related
the
things. The
fabulous.
connection is obvious. Where is our illustrious leader? Aaron, people want to see you on camera. He's probably playing with his snakes. Which is
Aren't
not
we
a
all?
euphemism.
Yeah. Okay. So
It is
on
the
verse
year
2.
of the
sorry.
snake, so yeah.
That is true.
Is it indeed?
I went to one of the local Chinese restaurant on Tuesday, because that was Lunar New Year, and they had like decorations and stuff, and some of the snakes were fuzzy. I just thought that was quite funny.
Aww.
Like they had like these like cute cartoony snake mascots, but they were like they had like looked like they were furry, and I'm like, they're snakes. Snakes don't have fur, but then Chinese
They're
dragons
cute.
sometimes have fur. So
Yeah, there's
it's interesting.
furry and feathered dragons and
All right, are we ready to continue?
No,
Tom is on verse 2.
I am on verse 2. Yes. We're talking about fuzzy snakes here. Yeah, we'll get to verse 2. So on verse 2,
get back here, Aaron.
The mistress orders you.
Want to see him. Sorry.
Yeah.
He's trying to put a jumper on a snake.
He will eventually, you know that.
Like a
okay.
sweater, not
Tomer,
not
please
like a
continue.
cable.
Thank you.
Yeah.
On verse 2, a small jar of olive oil. In Hebrew, it's asuch shaman. The word asuch is a hapax. Some have taken asuch to be a noun, a jar, vessel, or flask, like Josephus in Antiquities 948, Targum and Peshitta, or as a verb, anoint yourself, as we see in Septuagint, oil with which I shall anoint myself, and Vulgate, a little oil to anoint me. Traditionals combine both readings. It was a jar of oil used for anointing. Likewise, McKenzie renders an anointing measure of oil. Olive oil was one of the staples of the Israelite diet and had a high market value.
Yeah, but if it was anointing oil, then it would have been probably lower quality.
Yeah. On verse 4, go inside and shut the door behind you and your sons. Rashi and Kara wrote that this affords respect to the miracle if it comes about in secret. Likewise, Sweeney writes that the closed door suggests the miraculous nature of the event. McKenzie writes that
'Cause that's the way all miracles happen. You have to put a sheet in front of it or a
Most
blanket.
respectful. Yeah.
Because what's about to happen, it's not creepy at all.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Mackenzie writes that the closed doors, quote, keep curious neighbors from interfering in the woman's execution of Elisha's instructions and in readers' experience of the event, end quote, which further highlights the neighbors' generosity as they are willing to lend their vessels without knowing the details of how they will be used.
Aaron, I said that you were going to trying to go put a jumper on one of your snakes, and
Don't give him ideas.
Someone in the comments said, "Jumpers for snakes? Isn't that an unfinished sock?" That's really good.
If I lived closer, I'd make you adorable little snake sleeves.
Trevor and Wright says, to what extent would you say does jealousy and betrayal plays a significant role in 2 Kings 3 in terms of reshaping a patriarchal society?
You give loaded questions all the time. Like it's not something that we can answer here, I guess.
Yeah.
It's a fairly involved question. I mean, yeah. Patriarchy was
Yes.
read Francesca Stavropoulos on the way that patriarchy became so idolized in that area and the forms and shapes it went through.
But why chapter 3?
Because we've read chapter 3, Isaac.
Right, I'm trying to figure like what was.
Yeah, I didn't see much jealousy of anything in chapter 3.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, not really jealousy. If you're thinking of 4 and the woman and the she can't live without her husband and sons in a patriarchal society, then
Oh, okay, yeah, that's chapter.
yeah,
4.
that's
maybe that makes sense. But jealousy, and betrayal. I mean,
Okay, so on verse 6, then the oil stopped flowing. Genesis Rabbah 35:3 reads, "It was already written regarding Elisha, she departed from him," in verse 5. Why then does the verse state afterwards, she came and told the man of God, in verse 7? The explanation is that, quote, the oil had stopped, vaya'amod, in verse 6. What happened was that the price of oil had miraculously risen, and she came to ask whether she should sell it or not sell it. The latter blessing was greater than the former. You and your sons will live on the remainder, in verse 7, until the dead will come to life.
Yeah, there's multiple ways of saying this. One is like that you and your children will live forever. There's one that says that the oil will keep pouring, so you'll be able to like sustain yourselves on more oil whenever you want. But also the idea of like the oil stopped, and that kind of refers to like the market, like there was less oil, and I wonder if that's like a connection to like, here's a miracle where we produce oil from nothing. Maybe it has to come from somewhere. Maybe there's like a second law of thermodynamics in play in like miracles. So
so God is magically stealing oil from somewhere in the Levant and just like funneling it through the void to this widow at the bottom of
all the olives, and suddenly the marketplace is like, oh, there's not enough oil because all of the trees are like producing less oil, and then she brings the oil in, and instead of it flooding the market and lowering the price went up, so she was able to sell at a good value.
Well, God did kind of owe her if she was indeed the widow of the man who saved all his prophets from being killed.
Okay, on verse 7, Kimchi, signing in Aramaic Tosefta, which origins I couldn't find, writes, and he quotes from the Aramaic. I had to get someone, talked with somebody else who knew Aramaic to figure what he said. And so he writes, quote, "When the miracle happened, she said to the prophet of God, 'Do I need to increase the oil tenfold or not?' He said to her, quote, 'Your husband has provided the prophets of Yahweh in a matter in which there is no requirement of a tenfold increase, and so your oil has no such requirement because it came from a miracle,' end quote. She returned and said to him, quote, 'What shall I do if the sons of Achab hear about me and coerce me to charge me for the oil?' End quote. He responded and said to her, quote, 'He who closed the mouths of the Egyptian dogs and is about to shut the mouth of Daniel's lions will shut the eyes of Achab's sons and will close their ears so that they won't harass you,' end quote. He gave her an admission in praise, and she left.
Yeah. I think there's one thing I remember about learning about this story as a kid, was that the children were bringing the jugs, every jug they could find, every vessel, and they brought broken parts and shards, and they would put oil into the shard, and the shard would magically become a full vessel. So they would have multiple shards from the same vessel became multiple vessels and stuff.
Yeah. Okay, on verse 8, Shunem. Fritz notes that Shunem, also mentioned in Joshua 19:18 and 1 Samuel 28:4, is found at Solem and on the eastern border of the Jezreel plain. It is also the place of origin of Abishag in 1 Kings 1:1-4. He writes, quote, "The geographical position requires that Elisha would occasionally leave his sphere of influence in the south of Israel, although the destination of his wanderings is not mentioned," end quote. on that same verse, a well-to-do woman. In Hebrew, isha gdola, literally a great or big woman. This reading is found in most early translations. Most traditionals render important or wealthy woman, with Rashi and Kimchi noting that in the Midrash, Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer 33, she is identified as the sister of Abishag the Shunammite. Targum reads, a woman fearing sins. And Dre writes, quote, it is surprising that this description should be applied to a woman, given that the generally low status afforded to them in rabbinic times. It appears that the Shunammite woman's generous hospitality to Elisha had earned for her special spiritual eminence, end quote. Although modern commentators render wealthy woman, McKenzie notes that Gedula might also be translated as old, a reading favored by J. Tropper. He notes that according to Sour Wine, quote, this translation would fit the story very well as an explanation for the woman's childlessness and an enhancement of the miracle of her son's birth, end quote. He writes, however, that the description in verse 10 makes clear that the immediate interest is in her wealth. Fritz notes that apart from Elisha and Gehazi, none of the characters are named, which might indicate that the narrator was not relying on any specific models.
It's rather silly to think that there's something wrong with calling her a wealthy woman. I mean, she apparently has enough spare room in her house to set up, independent rooms for the prophet to stay whenever he wants and leaves them empty the rest of the time. And, her husband is a landowner and off in the fields and, can give her a donkey and servant to travel with whenever she needs to run off and do errands that she's not telling him about because don't mention our son is dead. It's the capacity she has to do things would indicate a certain amount of material substance, shall we say.
And not to mention that I think in antiquity, oil was one of those high commodities in antiquity. Like
As I mentioned.
Yes. So
definitely.
just if she wasn't
Right,
rich
but
at the time, maybe she was definitely very rich after she met
Yeah,
Elijah.
we're not talking.
Oh,
I
not
don't
the
think
widow,
it
though.
implies it's the same. I don't think it's with Elijah. It's there's two stories with the same widow, and over here it's two different women in two different places.
Yeah, and the
does it
Shunammite
say-
isn't a widow. Her husband is there.
Is alive.
She just
yeah.
keeps him out of the loop.
Yeah, it's two similar stories, but in this version they're two different characters. So yeah,
It does make you
there's
wonder
also
if
she's
husband was a
giving
guide
him
for him.
food before she knows that he's a man of God. So, I guess it would be a rich woman who would oh, here is a traveler. Let me feed, just out of the generosity of her own heart to give him food and bread or whatever. She didn't even know that he was a
Hospitality was
prophet.
still sacred, though.
Yeah. So she was doing this for a while before, and then she says, "Oh, now I know he's the holy angel of God." How did she know? Apparently, according to Rashi, she inspected his sheets.
Yeah.
There was
No, I wanted to get to that because I have a comment on this.
Okay.
Amazing how these rabbis speculate so crazy.
I think this one's from.
That's Talmud Berachot 10b.
Yeah, it's
So,
in
are
Talmud,
Are we
yeah.
suggesting that that the kid might have, her husband was old and maybe Elisha helped a little more in the producing of that child than?
I'll
it's like
read
she
you.
told
I'll
her
read you the
husband that-
comment. Wait,
Yeah.
I'll read the comment.
do
So
it, you do it.
on verse 9, I know that this man is a holy man of God. How did she know that? Rashi, based on Talmud Berachot 10b, wrote that she never saw a fly at his table or semen on his sheet.
Oh my God!
Well, if that doesn't tell you someone's a prophet, I don't know what will.
I mean, that just scares me. The idea of apparently it's common for people who clean sheets to notice to notice semen. Oh, a man has slept on this one.
Yeah. Yeah. Kimchi wrote that Elisha was already known to be a man of God. The woman does not say that she already knew. That she knew now, hinena, that he was a prophet, but rather that they need to do something for him because he is accustomed to live with them. Gersonides wrote that the woman investigated Elisha's behavior when he was at their house and deduced that he was a prophet. Cogan notes that this is the only place in the Hebrew Bible where a prophet is called holy, kadosh, a term which usually comes in reference to priests, as we see in Leviticus 21:7, Nazarites in Numbers 6, 5, and 8, and all of Israel in Exodus 19:6 and Deuteronomy 7:6.
That just
I know
seems
he's holy.
silly.
I spied on him in the bath and he didn't touch himself.
Question.
It's
So for
silly.
kadosh, are those the same letters as kadesh?
No,
Yeah.
it's kinda.
Wait.
It's in that specific kadosh is kuf dalet vav shin. The kadashim don't have the vav, but
Okay.
it's the same
The-
root.
Okay.
Yeah, the vav is like it's kind of like a vowel holder letter.
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah.
Explain to me what the religious obsession is with coming up with the most convoluted and incoherent explanation for something that's perfectly mundane.
Because
I mean,
it's
Elisha
fun.
is clearly well known. The king stops him. Prophet was actually a job back then, so it's not like it's somehow, nobody's ever seen such a thing. It was literally a well-known profession. And even her husband says it's not a new moon feast when you would get a prophet, because obviously that's just a normal thing to do.
We're talking about 2,000 years ago when they were writing this. Not like they had Nintendo back then, They had to,
No.
they had to entertain themselves somehow.
They had a Bricktendo.
I love reading what scholars have to say. I do, but nothing has better helped me understand like doctrinal debates than listening to nerds talk about comic books. It's exactly the same mechanism.
Okay, so on verse 12, Gehazi, Sweeney notes that many explain his name as a form of the phrase "a valley of vision." In compare Gei Chizayon in Isaiah 22:1 and 5. McKenzie, however, writes that this meaning is inappropriate for a personal name. He notes Gray's opinion that it derives from a root meaning avaricious, which would fit the character, but the Arabic root jahida, which is not found in standard Arabic dictionaries. Halot, following Bauer, renders goggle-eyed. Yeah.
What are goggles like in that sense?
I have no
Goggly
idea.
eyes, like someone with sticky outy eyes.
Oh, like googly eyes, rather. Or
Yeah,
I know.
googly. Goggles are the things you wear when you're swimming.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and Lawrenson's out. Okay.
Right, so it's like moving. So it's the sense of like eyes that are moving around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Okay. On verse 13, you have gone to all this trouble for us. Hebrew for trouble is chagada, from the root chet resh daled, to tremble, show fear or anxiety. Thus, Targum reads, you have gone to all this trouble for us. Traditionals take the root here to mean that she was diligent concerning the task of lodging Elisha. Likewise, Vulgate reads, thou hast diligently served us in all things. Sweeney writes that the term indicates the proper respect that she has shown to the holy man. Septuagint reads, you amazed us with all this amazement, and Peshitta, you have treated us with this deference. On that same verse, I have a home among my own people. The Hebrew Bible reads, I settle among my people. In Hebrew, betoch ami anochi yoshavet. Rashi comments, I live among my relatives, i.e., no one harms me, and I have no need for the king or for the general of the army. Likewise, Cogan writes that my own people, can refer to a group close to a person, as we see in 1 Kings 19:21, and she explains that her relatives can help her during trouble. Hens-Piazza writes that she identifies herself with the people of her town, and not with the royal elite. Targum reads, in the midst of the troubles of my people, I am carrying on.
Basically, she's well provided for. She doesn't have anything she needs, which is why she can afford to set up a prophet in her house periodically.
No.
Aaron's parrot has gone to join the choir invisible.
This is an ex-parrot. Woo!
Mhm.
I love how it's see-through.
An
It's so funny.
ethereal parrot.
Yes. That's what you get for being green.
Yeah, I love parrots. I want like those what do they call them, macaws?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, they're dope.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they're
The highest
still
kind
ranked
of
one is, like-
dangerous, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a guy around this area, or a couple, I should say, that have a hyacinth macaw, and they take it to like the coffee shop, but they've got like really long tails, so they can't really stand on flat surfaces. I think they can only like perch on like the edge of a table or on a branch. Well, maybe they can do it, but they have to like bend all the way forward.
Yeah, they're kind of
Yeah,
awkward.
something like this or an African gray would be much better. But I mean, he has a tendency to bite and just be,
Oh.
without warning, vicious. If you had a macaw and it did that, you'd lose a hand over it.
I'll take my chances.
He needs love, Aaron. He just needs love and cuddles.
Yeah. Ow.
Okay. On verse 16, Elisha announces to the woman that she will have a son. Fritz writes that the birth of a son was not only essential for the survival of the family in ancient Israelite society, but also meant the greatest fulfillment in the life of a woman. The fulfillment of the promise at that season in due time, la moed hazekaet, indicates the special ability of the prophet to influence the course of nature. Sweeney writes that the death of her husband without a male heir leaves the woman in difficulty as the husband's property, and even the woman might be claimed by one of his male relatives. As we see in Deuteronomy 25, 5-10, though in Numbers 27, 1-11, and 36, chapter 36, women are allowed to inherit property. Hens-Piazza writes that the woman knows the shame of childlessness in a patriarchal society and does not want to be falsely encouraged.
Can't blame her for that.
On 18 and 19, Fritz comments, The episode gives a particular slant to the subsequent narrative, since the reader or listener now knows of the special circumstances surrounding the birth. This is not any child, but an only son whose existence is owed to the prophet. Verse 18 links the narrative explicitly to what went before. In verse 19, the death of the child is summarily told without mentioning its precise cause. It is assumed that the boy is still of childhood age. In what follows, the mother appears as an unfailing supporter of the prophet. It is from him that she expects help, even in the face of the death of her child. Although the nature of her expectations is not specified, it is obvious to all concerned what they are. And finally, on 23, it's not the new moon or the Sabbath. Fritz writes that the remark indicates that both days were specially celebrated in the time of the narrator. The new moon, Chodesh, is the first day of the lunar month, and the Sabbath, Shabbat, is the seventh day of the week. He writes that the Sabbath was taken out of a strictly monthly context to which it had properly once belonged, in order to become a holiday independent of the monthly cycle. Likewise, McKenzie comments, quote, The new moon was the first day of the lunar calendar. It was a day of rest in Amos 8:5, feasting in 1 Samuel 25.
What?
Don't.
The way you said that. The way you said that.
Feasting, yeah.
Feasting.
Yes.
Not
Feasting.
the day of fisting.
That's just the
To the
first day
Lord.
of the fisting.
I
thought it was
Okay,
I hate you all.
multiple
I
days
hate
of
all of
fisting
you.
doesn't sound like a good idea, guys. I appreciate the enthusiasm, but my God.
Hence the term mooning.
Ah,
I'll
The
continue.
new moon.
By
But wear protection.
By Allah, you're all dogs. I will continue as usual. Okay, so feast
You had that
That's how you
ready.
blame
feasting
us for your problem.
in 1 Samuel 25, 18-24, and cultic celebration in Isaiah 113, 66:23, and Psalms 81:4, entailing special sacrifices in Numbers 28, 11 through 15, Ezekiel 46:6, and Ezra 4:5 that could be extended for additional days in 1 Samuel 20:27. Its pairing with Sabbath here and elsewhere in Isaiah 113, 66:23, Ezekiel 46:1, and Amos 8:5 suggests that the Sabbath was initially celebrated in the middle of the month rather than weekly.
Or 3 times a month. The first, I always get confused, right? The first quarter is the half moon, and then you have the half moon, which is the full moon, and then the third quarter, which is another half moon. So it's very possible that the days of the week was just based on the lunar month, and the first 7 days later would have been the Sabbath, and then another 7 days later would be the Sabbath. But then they were like, this doesn't match, so
Going
they
through the
ended up
quarters of the
changing it
moon.
maybe.
Yeah.
But that could have been a long time ago.
It's interesting though. I mean, we've already discussed previously several cases where older versions of holidays and holy days were adapted, mashed together, the stories on them were rewritten. I mean, the Feast of Unleavened Bread being, wrapped up with the
Passover.
myth of the Exodus and the Passover, which at least at one point appears to have been a completely different celebration. Yeah, there's a lot of retconning and mashups.
Got more comments. Let's see. We have Trevor and Wright again. I know it's going to be I'm just seeing Trevor Wright, and I know that the question's going to be big, right? It's not a yes or no. It can't be answered with a simple number. No, it's a right. In terms of the use of oil in 2 Kings, was it seen as a symbolic gesture? The use of oil? Oh, we can't answer this with a yes or no. Good.
No.
I
mean,
No,
it depends.
Yes and no. You could come up with a symbol for it, but in this
Yeah,
case,
I mean,
it was also
really-
practical.
It was symbolic of Elisha's prophetic
think-
spirit, I guess.
I think spiritual things, or like the Torah, like the studies of the Torah are sometimes likened to oil. So maybe like the oil keeps pouring without end could be seen as a
You could-
metaphor for
You could write a
teaching.
sermon about that, or come up with a grand divine metaphor. But there's also just potentially the fact that oil's expensive and she needs a lot of money right now.
I'm not sure about what someone said about anointing someone on the forehead is based on whales having melons and spermaceti, whatever, on their foreheads, but that's a
I haven't heard
interesting
that one.
idea.
John Klein offers or gifted one RN Raw membership, and then John Klein says, "I'm just here to hear Tomer say fisting."
Aren't
So
we all though?
you made someone's day, Tomer, at least.
I'm ashamed of this culture and of society in general. May God save us all.
It's so much better than the alternative. So
Yeah, I hate it.
Hey, I am just working for my first class ticket to hell. I want to get with all the fun people.
Yeah. But Aaron, finish this chapter, please. Let's end this misery.
Let's end this. Then she saddled the donkey and said to her servant, "Urge the animal on. Do not hold back for me unless I tell you." So she set out, and she came to the man of God at Mount Carmel. When the man of God saw her coming, he said to Gehazi, his servant, "Look, there is the Shunammite woman. Run at once to meet her and say to her, 'Are you all right? Is your husband all right? Is the child all right?' She answered, 'It is all right.' When she came to the man of God at the mountain, she caught hold of his feet. Gehazi approached to push her away, but the man of God said, 'Let her alone, for she is in bitter distress. The Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me.'" What a surprise. Then she said, Did I ask my Lord for a son? Did I not say, 'Do not mislead me'?" He said to Gehazi, "Gird up your loins and take my staff in your hand and go." If you meet anyone, give no greeting. And if anyone greets you, do not answer, and lay my staff on the face of the child. I'd never imagined somebody being resuscitated by being caned in the face.
The police keep trying.
The tea bag of life.
You need medical assistance?
Yeah, it's far more appropriate to Call of Duty than...
Then the mother of the child said, "As the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave without you." So he rose up and followed her. Gehazi went on ahead and laid the staff on the face of the child 5 or 6 times. Sorry. But there was no sound or sign of life. He came back to meet him and told him, "The child has not awakened." When Elisha came into the house, he saw the child lying dead on his bed. So he went in and closed the door on the 2 of them and prayed to the Lord. Then he got up on the bed and laid down upon the child. No, and lay upon the child. Yeah, that's what it says.
Yes.
Putting his mouth upon his mouth,
Mm-hmm.
his eyes upon his eyes,
Mm-hmm.
and his hands upon his hands. While he lay bent over him,
Mm-hmm.
the flesh of the child became warm.
Mhm. Yeah.
He got down, walked once to and fro in the room, then got up again and bent over him. The child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. Elisha summoned Gehazi and said, "Call the Shunammite woman." So he called her. When she came to him, he said, "Take your son." She came and fell at his feet, bowing to the ground. And then she took her son and left. When Elisha returned to Gilgal, there was a famine in the land. As the company of prophets was sitting before him, he said to his servant, "Put the large pot on and make some stew for the company of prophets." One of them went out to the field to gather herbs. He found a wild vine and gathered from it a lap full of wild gourds, and came and cut them up into a pot of stew, not knowing what they were. They served some for the men to eat, but while they were eating the stew, they cried out, "O man of God, there is death in the pot." They could not eat it. He said, "Then bring some flour." He threw it into the pot and said, "Serve the people and let them eat." And there was nothing harmful in the pot. A man came from Baal-Shalisha. Yeah, that's what it. Baal-Shalisha. Bringing food from the first fruits to the man of God, 20 loaves of barley and fresh ears of grain in his sack. Elisha said, "Give it to the people and let them eat." But his servant said, "How can I set this before 100 people?" My gosh, this sounds familiar. So he repeated, "Give it to the people and let them eat. For thus says the Lord, they shall eat and have some left." He set it before them, and they ate and had some left, according to the word of God.
Yeah, so the first part of that,
Not bad for a week's work.
that obviously shares a resemblance to when Elijah did a similar thing.
Yeah.
But in some ways it's much funnier. He gets on the kid, realizes he's alive, walks around going, "Oh shit," and then gets back on the kid.
Yeah.
Are we seriously advocating resurrection via child molestation? Because it's starting
I mean,
to sound
Happened
like
twice so far.
It doesn't say he molested him, but it insinuates.
Look, I don't care. I'm
But
not comfortable with the man of God taking my
especially-
child to a room alone and laying on top of him.
Well, it seems
Especially
that
given the
practice-
Hebrew.
That practice is a
especially-
lot older than we thought.
I mean, especially
it's-
given the Hebrew Vayighar, which already sounds sexual.
Which one?
Vayighar alav in 34.
Oh yeah, and he mounted him.
Vayighar.
Oh,
And-
God.
Bent and crouched. Something like that.
And someone being on top of someone, I think that also carries a bit of like sexual innuendo, right? In some of these stories.
I mean,
I think it's supposed to be seen as like a healing, like
don't-
he's warming up the body.
Yeah,
And
something
maybe
like that.
maybe almost, I don't know if it's like I don't know if the mouth to mouth is seen almost like, like a kiss of life, like a breathing in,
transference of the spirit, I guess.
like almost
or
like
what-
Yeah,
a like
that's probably
a
what it is.
primitive version of CPR. But yeah. I mean, if the
Yeah.
spirit is seen as like, the breath, then him trying
Yeah.
to bring the breath, and also with the sneezing, right?
Yeah, that's what I
Like-
was going to say. I think it makes sense to me. Well, it doesn't make sense, but I think part of that, the sneezing 7 times, we know the number 7
Yeah.
is some sort of magical number. Is it
Yeah.
priestly, right? Priestly tradition, perhaps. But then the being like face to face, is there maybe superstition that perhaps the prophet inhaled whatever was killing the boy, like he took the illness from the boy? Could that be happening
out
here?
the
It could be. I mean,
I mean, the warming up the flesh seems to make some sense, and like, I mean, obviously it's supposed to be a miracle. He's supposed to be actually dead, and somehow that the spirit hasn't left the body yet, and he's like, warming up the body, like, is able to like almost like medically bring it back to life.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
if
it's
yeah, it's interesting.
Sorry.
Not at all.
Yeah, I mean, the breath is like this is like the soul, right? And if the soul is supposed to be leaving the body, like breathed his last and stuff, and here he's like bringing it back, and then the kid sneezes.
Yeah, I mean, commentators generally take it as a sympathetic magic or something like that. They'll describe it as an act of magic or something like that.
He's
An act of
lying opposite him,
sympathetic
alive. He's dead.
Yeah.
So the idea of being to transfer some of your vitality and possibly by breathing into his nostrils, even if you're not doing a proper CPR kind of vibe. Which, incidentally, they don't make you do that anymore.
See, the Bible is correct about CPR.
You don't have
But
to breathe, although possibly for drowning victims you might. But for cardiac arrest, you just pump. Ask
It
me
is
how I know.
strange from like a religious perspective that like miracles need what's the word, like ritual, like they are like an incantation or a spell of some sort, or like you have to set something up, you have to do it in a certain place, you have to do it at a certain time, like when if you move it away from that place, it
You have to
stops,
invent
like,
a cause because they don't know the real cause.
Oh, there is.
it's not magic.
McKenzie.
Yeah.
McKenzie notes he explains why he had to why the Hebrew Gehar. He writes that since Elisha was taller than the boy, it was necessary for him to draw up his limbs into a crouch, Gehar, in order to match the boy's body parts.
Oh, like the bit where he says that he was bent over him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we clarified exactly why he had to mount the unconscious boy.
Yeah, that didn't
Yeah,
help
the
at all.
mounting is actually the word before that, the Vaya'al, and he got up on,
Vaya'al, I love him.
and he got up, and he went on
got
top,
up on him. Late.
Yeah, got up.
I mean,
Guys,
the
you're
Hebrew
gonna
it's very
drive
shut up.
me to drink.
Go drink then.
Yeah, it's like Vaya'al, Vayikar, and it's like, and he got up and bent over,
Yeah.
crouched. Yeah.
I wonder why this passage never gets preached on Sunday.
Can't
I wonder.
imagine.
You have to go to the after hours preach.
I
yeah.
have actually heard youth pastors preach this one, or maybe it was the other one where Elijah lay on the boy, but it's all about, the breathing and and it's usually about faith and how you're supposed to not just keep doing the magic thing, and then God will eventually honor it and you'll get your life back. Because, it's always bullshit. It's always good bullshit.
Ronaldo
youth
Martinez offers $2 and says, "What's your opinion of Paul and Jan Crouch?"
Who?
That would be my opinion
Who?
too. I have no idea
Yeah,
what they're
I have
talking
no
about.
idea who those people are.
Bull and
Crouch.
Jack Crouch.
Which ones
televangelist.
are Crouch?
They are televangelists. I'm not on that field.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have no idea. Satan616 says
TBN.
Elisha kissed a dead child. Yep, Catholicism is the one true religion. The Bible confirms it.
Yeah, you can't say those Catholics don't follow biblical tradition.
What are you talking about? He didn't eat him.
Yeah, I didn't think Second Kings was a Catholic.
Yeah.
Most
As
of the
far as the
kings were.
Crouches, they started Trinity Broadcasting Network, which is a pretty good indication that they're Seven Mountains Christians, which are responsible for the infestation of the worst forms of Christianity into many, many portions, if not all portions, of your American culture. So they're gross and creepy.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw the
Mhm.
picture
Gross.
of this Jan, I thought that Trinity Broadcasting was a reference to Trinity Taylor.
Nope. No,
The
it's a
drag
creepy
queen.
Christian channel, which inadvertently,
Also
is it
known as-
like because the Christian Broadcasting Network wasn't fanatical enough that they came up with the Trinity? I don't know. You'd have to look into. There's lots of interesting lore. They're creepy, gross televangelists who look like they're made of plastic. And honestly, I swear to God, the televangelists always make me think, I see how people came up with the reptoids in human skin conspiracy theory. It was probably them.
Trinity Taylor is better known as Trinity the Tuck.
They were sued for $40 million for plagiarizing a novel.
Oh, is that all? No
Mhm.
sex scandals?
Yeah, because they're not deceivers or deniers, and
Right, they're just
Scam
cheats and
artists.
frauds,
Yeah.
and yeah,
So
Yeah,
they definitely didn't watch the H bomber guy video. Okay.
it's always just a betting pool of, are they going to be financial fraudsters? Are they going to be sex criminals, rapists, etc., or both? And usually you can tell by what they preach about most.
Okay. So I'll start on verse 27. Gehazi came over to push her away. Kimchi comments, either for her respect, so that she won't kiss the prophet's feet, or in respect for the prophet, so that she won't hold his legs. End quote. And Gersonides comments,
a woman touching a man probably would have been seen as inappropriate.
obviously. Gersonides comments, he might have done that in respect of Elisha because he knew that he did not want a woman to get so close to him. End quote. Yeah. And Cogan comments, quote, Elisha ordered Gehazi to let her go in order for her to speak. He was surprised by the woman's outburst, who usually acted in restraint and courtesy. He also does not know of what had happened to her at that moment. In other instances, it is said that the Lord prepared the prophet for what is to come by an early revelation. Thus, Yahweh informed Samuel of Saul's coming in 1 Samuel 9:15 and Achia regarding Jeroboam's wife's visitation in 1 Kings 14:5.
That is actually remarkable, because all of these things being written after any facts that may have had anything to do with them, usually the prophet is always written as having known, of course, the Lord told me in advance that blah, 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 blah. This is actually remarkable in the case that he says, the Lord has hidden it from me, which is, of course, prophet talk for, I don't know, but it's also because of the power of God, so shut up. That's very rare in a narrative that the prophet will not know and will admit it.
The Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me.
Yeah. Okay, on 34, he lay on the boy, mouth to mouth, eyes to eyes, hands to hands. Kimchi explains that either Elisha has done this so that he may pray better for the boy, or to, quote, breathe upon the boy and warm him with his natural heat which comes from out of his mouth, his palms, and his eyes, for most miracles are done with few tricks from the way of the world, end quote. Modern commentators describe Elisha's behavior as an act of magic. Sweeney writes that there is an analogy with Yahweh's breathing life into the first human at the time of creation. Fritz writes that the body contact, quote, confirms the share that the prophet has in this singular event. The life force of Elisha is passed on to the dead boy through through his touch, end quote. On 35, the boy sneezed 7 times. Hebrew for sneezed is LeYisra'el, from the root zayin resh resh. The root only appears here in the Hebrew Bible. Targum reads, the boy sneezed up to 7 times, a reading favored by most traditionals, with Kimchi noting that the Targum on Job 41:10, Atishotav is zariroi. Likewise, Hallett renders to sneeze, based on Aramaic zarira and Arabic dara, meaning to strew or spray. Abravanel explains, quote, his pores opened and the spirit of life passed to his organs, end quote. Sweeney writes that the boy's 7 sneezes indicate the perceived efficacy of the number 7 in ancient Israelite popular thought. Septuagint reads, Elisha bent over the child until 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. McKenzie writes that the Masoretic text reading may be a corruption or variant of Vaya'ol, arose oneself or awaken. Vulgate reads, the child gaped 7 times, and Peshitta, the youth yawned 7 times. On 38, Fritz comments, the episode is one of a number of short miracle stories whose aim is to glorify Elisha's deeds. Its setting is Gilgal in the Jordan Valley near Jericho, where a large number of unmarried followers apparently live together. Cogan and Tadmo write, quote, a simple lifestyle characterizes the members of these groups. In many instances, they appear on the verge of starvation, and these stories recall Elisha's miraculous aid in their time of need, end quote. It is implied that in times of famine, people would live on wild plants growing on the open fields around the settlement, end quote. On 39, herbs. In Hebrew, it's orot. The noun appears in Isaiah 26:19, but is also known from Ugaritic and post-biblical Hebrew. Septuagint has arioth. Yeah, because original. All original. Rashi, based on Talmud Yoma 18b, wrote that this was a field rocket, which is called oruge, and it enlightens me'ir, the eyes. Likewise,
I think that's Americans call it arugula.
Could be.
Rocket.
Yeah.
We say rocket, they say arugula, and orog is
Is
French,
French.
French version of it.
Very bitter herb type.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, roquette is, a small. It comes from the same name, but it means like a smaller version of it, like et at the end is small.
Yeah.
Roquette.
Yeah. Likewise, Cogan notes Yehuda Felix's opinion that this refers to Eruca vesicaria, known for its spiciness. Hella takes the plant to be mallow, specifically Malva rotundifolia, known as a light plant, quote unquote, i.e., very sensitive to light. Likewise, Fritz writes that this refers to mallow, quote, a kind of shrub whose leaves could be cooked, end quote. Other translations like Vulgate, Peshitta, and Targum, and commentators like Kimchi, Gersonides, Ibn Kaspi, McKenzie, and Sweeney take it as a general term for herbs or vegetables.
Yeah, aruca is the Latin name for the rocket.
Yeah. Now, a wild vine, in Hebrew it's gefen sadeh. While the word gefen generally refers to a vine and is rendered as such by early translations, Kimchi notes that some, like Ibn Kaspi, take the gourds, pekuot, to be mushrooms, which grew next to the vines, as we see in Talmud Berachot 40b. He notes that according to the Geonim, the gourds were like small bitter melons, and their seeds are used to make oil, known as chantal, or chanthal, in Arabic. Compare Mishnah Shabbat 2:2. Likewise, modern commentators identify the plant as Citrulus colocynthus, aka vine of Sodom or bitter apple, a poisonous fruit known for its, quote, pungent smell and purgative properties, end quote, according to Sweeney. Fritz notes that its flesh is used as a remedy, especially for stomach pains, but the plant is otherwise inedible.
I like
on
the
verse-
idea that it's
sorry.
like poisonous mushrooms. Like that
And
was the only
laxative.
thing plants that could be poisonous.
or hallucinogenic mushrooms.
That's-
Oh, dude, there's death in the pot.
He put all of the food in
Yeah.
front of them, and they was leftovers because no one. Actually, everyone thought they were eating, but they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know what kind of poison can be counteracted with flour.
Oh, speaking of which, I'll get to that. Okay, on verse 40, McKenzie comments, the cry of death in the pot in verse 40, while they ate, suggests that the bitter taste of the stew was the immediate source of concern rather than illness. These factors suggest that the mention of death was something of an exaggeration, though it links this story nicely with the previous one. The crisis, nevertheless, was a real one. The food was ruined, and this was no small matter in a famine. The outcry, Tza'ak, also fit the typical plot of the legenda: crisis, appeal, and miraculous resolution. The ready availability of meal in time of famine was a slight inconsistency, but not an outright contradiction. The tension is negligible in a legenda whose focus is the wondrous deed of the prophet. Besides, only a small quantity was required.
I'm sorry, how is this a time of famine? I thought the famine ended with the rain under Elijah, and he's already been.
I mean,
sucked
it says
off
on
to
verse
heaven.
38, the famine was in the land.
Oh, okay, you're right. I missed that one.
So then all
Again.
of a sudden they had flour ready to go. Like I don't understand. Why?
I mean-
Why?
You had a
I guess.
handful enough to. I mean, it's a thickening agent, but I don't really see it's gonna.
Yeah, I mean, could assume that they had some flour, right? I mean, famine doesn't mean that you don't have flour. It just,
just don't have a lot.
but it's not enough, right? Unless seems like it. Okay, so on verse 41, flour. Although Sweeney writes that the flour, quote, would absorb oil and provide some coating in the stomach that would protect those eating the food, end quote, McKenzie writes that this theory is a rationalization that misses the point of the legenda. Fritz writes that it is not the flour that causes the miracle, but rather the prophet. As Wolfwine explains, quote, the flour is only the means by which he confirms his supernatural power, end quote.
I mean, it could be another example of like doing something that you kind of goes like, you wouldn't assume that would fix it, and then it does. Like with putting salt in water, or what was the other one? Pouring water over the fire, the wood. So adding flour could have just been like, here's some flour. It doesn't work. That shouldn't do anything, and then it works.
Do you ever wonder if some religions were started by bad, like failed illusionist magicians in the future who just time traveled and, shocked and awed all the people and yield and passed?
I mean, it's possible that there were people that took advantage of knowing how to do tricks and stuff and relying.
Oh,
on the
they
people
definitely
that
did.
Believed in magic and
Instances
Yeah.
of it. Some say the reason Christianity wasn't debunked so thoroughly is because one of the prime debunkers was debunking a cult around a snake with a puppet head on it that they used a tube to use to make the gods speak. There was it's a first century, second century religion cult in the greater Greek and Roman world, I think. Lawrence, does that ring a bell? I forget the name of it. It's Lawrence?
Sorry, I was actually checking some commentaries.
The audacity.
Yeah, sorry. Could you repeat the question?
I was asking about that cult that was debunked by that guy who was like the James Randi of his day, the one where they had a snake with the head of a man god, except it was an actual snake, and they just put a puppet head on it and they had a tube going out the back and would speak to God. And they had a whole bunch of cult followers and totally.
I do not remember the name of the group.
I know. I can't. It's some fucking weird ass group.
But I also remember
name.
that I think. Oh wait.
But there was a guy. devoted
Glycon,
to
maybe?
debunking it. Yes, that Glycon might be the. That sounds right.
What a name.
Point is, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain religions have totally been a thing, and not all
And
of them had a
that
nice...
was the person was Lucian, I guess. Lucian of
Lucian
Samosata.
was the debunker one, because I
Yeah,
think Lucian
Oh,
was
yeah,
just
yeah,
one
yeah.
of the...
Yeah, Lucian of Samosata was a
Lucian of
satirist.
Samosata.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think some of his works have been used in like Greek readers. So like where the book, the actual text is in Greek, but like for like rare words, it gives you like a translation, so you can like actually learn the Greek through that.
Interesting.
Okay, on verse 42, Baal Shalisha. Kimchi wrote that Baal Shalisha is identical with the land of Shalisha in 1 Samuel 9:4, located at Mount Ephraim in the Benjaminite territory. Modern commentators generally locate it with Khirbet el Marjame, next to the spring of En Samia. The Septuagint read Baith Sarisa, which McKenzie takes as an attempt to remove the offensive Baal element. Likewise, Targum reads the land of the south, with Dre explaining that the Targumists did not know the exact location of the place, but had the intention of removing the Baal element. Peshitta reads the city of the heroes, probably reading Bet HaShalishim. And finally, on some heads of new grain, in Hebrew, Carmel betziklono. The word tziklono is a hapax, and its exact meaning is unclear. Septuagint reads fruit cakes, Vulgate new corn in his scrip, Targum broken corn in his garment, and Peshitta grain wrapped in a cloth. Cogan notes that in Ugaritic texts, the name Betsekel is a synonym of shibolet, oats, and thus it has suggested reading fresh grain or still in its oats. Now I should note I didn't quote this. It resembles Jesus, at least in Matthew. Matthew 6:30 through 44. Though while I couldn't really find sources, or at least a commentary on Mark, I should note from EBR, Encyclopedia of the Bible in its Reception. Dale C. Allison writes that the story of Jesus feeding 5,000 is modeled upon this.
5,000?
5,000.
5,000.
I thought it was 500. Okay.
No, it was 5,000. There was also an occasion with 4,000. It was 5 loaves and fishes with the 5,000.
Wow. Oh.
Yeah, and I think Kip also said in my Discord. Yeah, Lawrence, my Discord. That
Yeah, maybe I'm getting confused with the number of zombies or something.
Looks
where
like I
was it?
gotta throw down.
Yeah,
Get ready,
so he
Tomer.
writes. Yeah, get over it. So he writes that the Elijah and / Elisha stories definitely inform the structure and content of Luke's gospel.
Yeah, 100%.
I have to put a collar on this, but it is so comfy.
Yeah, so and I also have Luz's commentary. I mean, I checked on Ulrich Luz's commentary on Matthew. Writes that the decisive Old Testament prototype that was transferred to Jesus and that led to the formation of our story was the feeding miracle of Elisha in 2 Kings 4:42 through 44. Yes, Lawrence, that's exactly it.
Yeah,
It is not enough.
That's just the first part, but yeah.
Yeah, so it is not enough, however, simply to explain its origin abstractly, as the transfer of certain literary traditions to Jesus. Such a transfer occurs not in a vacuum, but in a real situation. It may have been a situation of neediness and hunger.
You know, it's funny. I'm getting a lot of use out of these things because for 2 of my classes, we have to read the New Testament. So I already for the homework that has already been due, I haven't read a single thing. Didn't need to. It's all because the first one is one class is Roman history, where we're going to be eventually talking about the Council of Nicaea. In fact, we're going to be reenacting the Council of Nicaea, which is going to be fun. And if I don't
Who
get
will be
Arius,
slapping?
if I don't get Arius, I will pay
That
someone
Nicholas.
for me to be Arius. So I and the thing is, we're supposed to like, argue for a certain position, and I'm like, I am gonna have so much fun.
Oh my god, professional wrestling. Oh,
But are you
cabrones,
going
yes.
to throw
Imagine the
hands?
potential, right?
Okay.
In your
Ari-
reenactment, are you going to?
No,
are you
it's
gonna
it's,
write
it's
the
supposed
whole
to be like
Bible?
it's supposed to be no, it's supposed to be like like you're gonna have the Athanasians and the Arians, and you're gonna people are just gonna be big group argument about the proper theological interpretation. And so that's in one of the classes. I'm very excited for that. And then in the other class is just an introduction to the New Testament. So I'm like, I'm good. I don't need to do anything.
An introduction. Yeah,
You should do a
you're
reenactment
several
of the.
stages past that.
You should
Yeah.
do a reenactment of the council that never happened. The one that some
The
people
one
on the
where
internet
Nicholas
think.
punches Arius? even though
The
he
one
wasn't
that
there?
the Bible was made in.
Yeah, when
that
they
one.
created the Bible from
Yeah.
wholesale and
Yeah,
I don't know, created Christmas or whatever.
Yeah.
Invented Jesus and yeah.
Santa
Oh,
Claus sitting at the top of the
Stop
table.
referencing. Come on, we are better than to reference Mr. Crockett.
No, you're not better.
I
Also-
am
Fisting and
absolutely better than Kirk Cameron saving Christmas. Don't you ever come at me like that.
Yeah.
You
Hey,
are
getting back to
literally other
subject,
pieces.
I did want to mention that miraculous feedings, such as this one here and what we read about Jesus in the Gospels, are not unique or exclusive to the Bible. Like there are miraculous feedings that you can read about in other works of antiquity, like in the Odyssey or Ovid's Metamorphosis, the Mysteries of Mithras, and other examples where gods facilitate some sort of miraculous feeding in order to demonstrate, their power and whatnot.
Mm.
Did you have myths of that kind of thing running around in your church? How missionaries would need to be fed, and so they'd keep cutting the bread, but they never ran out until they had enough for everyone, or the soup pot that would give out more than it should, or what have you?
I know one common saying was, where two eat, three will eat, or something, but I think that's just universal.
Okay.
But yeah, nothing that comes to mind, to be honest.
It was just sort of, those stories that would go
Mhm.
around and be part of Brother Andrew's mythos of, that kind of.
Oh, I bet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so Christians, I have 9, 10. I have 10.
Oh my God, they're
pages?
proliferating.
It's all about Jesus.
Kinda, yeah. So I'll start with Caesarius. Sorry, it's just it's so amusing. Okay, so I'll start with Caesarius, who writes that the widow signifies the church.
Oh, it's dumber than I thought. Ugh.
which was a captive because the Redeemer had not yet come. But after Christ our Lord, the true Redeemer, visited the widow, he freed her from all debts.
Oh my God.
Uh-huh.
They could have literally said any believer that's being persecuted. I could have come up with a better tie than that guy did. That's
Lawrence,
awful.
you and I could each come up with 6 better
Yeah, that's true.
Christianizations of that if we were both high.
I love the idea
So-
of the church pre-existing Christianity and then becomes is reformed.
Yeah,
by,
and also, who is
by
she the
whatever.
widow of then? If she's the church, isn't the entire point that the church is married to Christ and, came as a virgin with her lamps and her, no! Ugh.
Ephraim wrote that the empty vessels symbolize the saints who have rejected any worldly passion and are filled with the fat of the holy anointment and the oil of happiness.
Oh my God, it's not that deep, bro.
Caesarius
Sometimes
again.
a jar is just a jar.
Caesarius
Well,
again.
sometimes it's a
sorry.
door. Oh, sorry, I did that backwards. When is a door not a door? When it's a jar?
When is door Jesus? The neighbors are a figure of the Gentiles, that's Caesarius, who offered empty vessels in order that they might deserve to receive the oil of mercy.
So those would be the converts. Okay.
Caesarius said that just as the Shunammite woman bore a son at the prayer of Elisha, so the church bore the Christian people when Christ came to it.
Yeah, that's how it happened. But
I
you
am
know what?
willing-
You know what? Odes of Solomon 19.
I am willing to bet that there are furry fan fictions that are less convoluted and butchered, belabored than this. This is fuck.
Yeah, I'm sure you can find someone who does like these Christian exegesis of like Mpreg fanfics.
Oh no, don't, Isaac. We're going to counseling
I
after that.
didn't say that I was gonna make one up.
Oh god, the potential is awful. It's
Jesus
gonna
is
be
the Alpha
so
and the Omega.
horrible. I have
Shut
never
up.
looked into Rule 34, Jesus. I don't want to know.
Uh,
No.
I have more. Augustine wrote that Elisha, who later came in person to revive the child, was a type of our Lord who had sent his servant ahead of him with a staff that represents the law.
Oh, and the law hits you in the face. That is about beating you in the head with a stick. Okay, yeah, that
Yeah.
makes more sense than anything else he said.
Well, the kid is dead. There's only two things we can do. We can either
He's
You
not
gotta take
dead.
this
He's
walking stick.
pining.
and beat him in the face with it, or we can
Yeah.
molest the corpse.
What happens to go through his clothes and look for loose change?
Yeah. Caesarius said that the servant typified Moses, whom God sent into Egypt with a staff. Without Christ, Moses could scourge the people with the staff, but he could not free or revive them from original or actual sin.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's a bit.
Yeah, it is. Caesarius and Gregory the Great wrote that Elisha drew himself together so that he might fit the little child who lay dead, and what Elisha prefigured in the case of the boy, Christ fulfilled in the entire human race. Yeah. Jerome wrote that if instead of contracting, Elisha had expanded himself, the woman's widow would not have been restored to life. And in the same manner, Christ made himself less in order to give life.
What? The woman's widow?
The widow's son. Sorry, the widow's son.
Oh, no, I thought you. Yeah.
No, yeah. Sorry, they weren't that
So say it
advanced.
again. So if he had expanded instead of
If he had
contracted,
expanded himself, the widow's son would not have been restored to life. And in the same manner, Christ made himself less in order to give life. I have two more. Augustine wrote that the prophet did not cause the boy to come back to life by giving him a soul, rather because he loved him. He got God to do this miracle for him.
So the kid came back with no soul. I knew he was a ginger.
And finally, Ephraim wrote that when Elisha nourished 100 prophets with a little bit of bread, he prefigured.
Nourished.
Fuck you! He prefigured Jesus' miracle of the loaves and the fish.
Wow, thank you, Ephraim.
I
Yeah.
don't
I've
think
seen that
Homer
one
takes the New
coming.
Testament stuff quite as seriously.
I can't imagine why.
It's just
I
a
was
little bit above the
looking
Book
at
of
the
Mormon,
chat.
but yeah.
Chrissy, I got you. I have a feeling if you and I ever had drinks, we would have so many interesting stories and comparisons. That would be very fun. If we ever get the chance to do that, we have to do that. And
Oh, and
yeah.
Isaac, by the way, nourish is United States, so I'm correct on this.
Nourished.
Nourish is U.S. according to
Well, Americans say
Cambridge
nourished?
Dictionary. Yes.
Nourished, yes.
Nourished.
Long
Nourish.
U, nourish.
Yes. Yes.
Oh,
So-
you
Okay.
pronounce both vowels, but not especially elongate either of them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we say nourished like with a short U. Yeah, interesting.
Uh,
I mean, it makes.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm
it makes more sense, I guess, to do a long U sort of sound.
yeah, I'm done.
Well, I didn't know what I was expecting out of those Christians, but they were worse than I thought they would be.
Which is an accomplishment because our expectations are.
Yeah.
Hey, at least Jesus didn't have to lay on top of Lazarus. He just said, "Get up."
I have no idea what you're referring to.
You
but
mean
I'll
he
take
didn't
it.
hump his dead
It's
friend
when
back
Jesus
to
raises
life?
a dude.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, he
Elisha
also
raises a dude,
heals like
but he does.
just children, right? But like Lazarus was a big one.
Okay,
He was
I
actually
don't.
like an adult.
I don't care how much you like necromancy. Please do not hump your friends back to life in your campaign. That
I'm
does
sure
not-
Challenge
people-
accepted.
No.
I think we're very I'm sure there's a lot of people who are very thankful that Jesus didn't copy Elisha's method.
Most of
Is
them
that-
he copied, not that one.
Yeah,
If
I'm
he,
just saying. that
if he
specific
did,
method.
Isaac, imagine what would be going on in churches today.
Right.
Exactly what's
Yeah.
already going on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I'm
wait,
saying
wait.
like
And
literally,
worse.
the charismatic churches with the laying of hands. It would be
Well,
slightly
that
different, I guess.
that doesn't mind the Mormons, because they have in Moroni 8:17, "I love little children with a perfect love."
Ew.
So says the Lord. No.
So,
Nope.
Yeah,
Nope. Nope.
it's all
nope,
your fault.
nope.
It's all your fault. I can't help you. I can't.
okay. All right. So we're doing 2 Kings the 5th next week.
Yes.
Okay.
Though I see a comment.
Is there one fun? I haven't been getting a lot of comments today.
Yeah,
Matt
Peter's
White
been sleeping.
Matt White says, panel, when a child is pulled from very cold water, no heartbeat, no breath, and is brought back, is this a resurrection?
That's a resuscitation.
It's a resurrection if they were brain dead.
Yeah. The way I've heard it said by emergency workers or whatever, is that you're not dead until you're warm and dead.
Ooh.
I mean,
Right.
I
Like when you
can
start.
preserve
decaying.
you for a space of time, not infinitely, but
Hmm.
So I mean, there've been plenty of people. This happened quite a lot. To people in freezing conditions. I don't mean that they've been frozen, but drownings or whatever. And if the water's cold enough, then you can be preserved, possibly long enough to be resuscitated.
Well,
sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
Not
But
always.
then
not
when
a
you're
guarantee.
when you're warm, yep, give up. All right. Any closing comments?
Yeah, absolutely. Join my Discord, not Tomer's Discord. That's some bullshit. I will have his head on a pike. So join my Discord and go to the channel, Milwaukee Atheists. We do Quran readings every Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, I
yeah,
missed
that-
you this Wednesday, Lawrence. I promise
That's
I had a good
okay.
reason.
Yeah.
Everyone
So-
missed this us
I-
every-
I think some Americans think that the what's the national anthem is some sort of prophecy, and they're trying to fulfill it by
No.
creating a starry night. But yeah,
Aw.
don't. Hopefully that doesn't happen too much.
That's so
Lawrence, to keep things fair, I posted the link to both your Discord and Tomer's Discord in chat this time.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Wait.
It's the same Discord,
It's the
John.
same Discord,
Tomeri
yeah,
is
yeah.
just.
I was afraid
He's-
that Peter might send him to
Tomeri
like
is
a
trying
ritual
to
or
be a
something like that.
Christian.
I
come
would
in and
never
peel
do
over
that to
someone
you,
else's
Tomer.
stuff
To
and claim it as
Lawrence,
his own.
maybe, but not to you.
Maybe I got the wrong song.
I see what we're dealing with. Yeah.
I thought Tomer was just serenading people with his guitar on that Discord.
He does sometimes.
Are you referring to
We can't see anything, Tomer.
this
Yeah.
You need the light.
new electric guitar?
Sorry.
My headphones fell.
Turn
Sorry.
the lights on.
Wait,
He can't hear us because it's.
Aviv, light!
I have to show off. I have to show off somehow.
Yes, turn the lights on.
No, I don't. You just have to glamour on this black and white stuff, or you can check it out on the music stuff.
It's interesting how Jews ought to be the light of the world. Tomer keeps the light off. I don't get it.
He doesn't like to be seen.
I don't like people seeing my room because it's a mess every time.
How many years we've been doing this?
Doing what? Living?
This show?
He hasn't cleaned his room once.
Yeah.
2.5
Clean your room. I'm Jordan Peterson.
No.
So yeah, sorry, I misquoted the anthem. It's bright stars through the perilous flight.
Yeah.
That's
That's
and
terrible.
of course rockets, red glare, bombs bursting in the air. But that's a bit later on, I guess.
Rockets.
Okay. Are we done then?
Yeah, we're done.
All right.
I think we got it.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Bye bye.